Dawn arrives like a soft-spoken cinematographer washing the porch in a pale gold that does not insist, only suggests. Sparrows rehearse their bright syllables in the fig tree. Somewhere a kettle sighs. The day clicks into its first quiet frames. And yet inside your chest, there's a weight without shape, a muted stone wrapped in velvet. You move through the house as if hitting your marks, a smile here, a greeting there, the choreography of ordinary life. But behind the practiced gestures, something keeps flickering like a projector catching on torn film. You are living, and somehow not entirely here. The Buddha called suffering a simple fact, like weather, like gravity. Pain is not a scandal to be hushed, only a climate passing through the country of the heart. He also spoke of impermanence. Every storm keeps its own end date. Even this heaviness, this thin frost over your morning will loosen. Mist does not become the mountain by resting on it. If you mistake the passing mist for the mountain itself, you suffocate on vapor. But the mountain, wide-backed and patient, outlasts what clings and goes. In you is such a mountain, the sky of awareness broader than any cloud that dares to darken it. What makes you ache isn't always what happens. It's the hand that won't release. You want to hold a moment of ease like a petal pressed between pages to bolt the door against change, to bargain with time. The more fiercely you clutch, the more the world slides through your grip. Try to capture morning light with both fists. You catch only shadow. Try to cage a breeze. You imprison your own palms. It is not that the breeze betrays you, but that a breeze is faithful only to being a breeze. Let your hands learn the art the wind already knows opening. A monk once compared the mind to a courtyard mirror. When the market wind runs wild, dust clings, faces blur. Stop polishing for a while, and even your reflection disappears. But if the wind settles, and you wipe once with a calm cloth, the mirror does not need convincing to shine. The mind was never broken. It was only busy. Our trouble is not that the wind rises. Our trouble is that we keep fanning it with the newspapers of our thoughts, headlining the same old fear until it becomes the evening news. So do something gentler than banishment. When dread pads down the hallway and knocks, don't barricade the door. Open it the way you would to a tired traveler. Welcome fear, you might whisper, setting a cup on the table. Sit here where I can see you. Naming is noticing, and noticing is the first dissolving. Monsters shrink in lamplight, not because you fight them, but because you look without flinching. Practice this small hospitality and watch how the guest forgets to growl. Return to the breath the way a seabird returns to its invisible currents. Inhale and let the movie of your thoughts soften focus. Exhale and allow the grip of your ribs to release by a finger's breadth. Each mindful breath is not an escape, but a cut clean as a filmmaker's clapboard, severing the scene where panic improvises a plot for you. The body knows how to lead you back into the uncut present. Trust it more than your theories. Be kind to yourself in a way that feels almost awkward at first, tender in the way new shoes are tender. Compassion is not a public performance. Here, it is a permission slip. When your energy frays, trade the whip for a blanket. A field rests after harvest and becomes itself again. A chrysalis looks like a failure at flight until it opens. If love is patient with seedlings that haven't yet pierced the soil, let it be patient with your mornings that haven't yet warmed. Once in a village kiln where the air smelled of clay and ash, a potter held up a bowl that had cracked along the firing. He did not discard it. He traced the fracture with a resin flecked with powdered gold. When the bowl returned to the shelf, the seam caught sunlight and became a river of brightness, a geography of mercy. He said, "The break reveals where the heat has traveled." In you too are luminous rivers lines where the old fear once ran. Touched by wisdom and careful breath, even your fault lines can become conduits of light. You were not meant to be flawless. You were meant to be whole. You can try something as ordinary as placing a hand over the drum of your heart. The skin is not merely surface, it is a door. I see you, you murmur to the ache without drama, without trial. Inhale, I acknowledge. Exhale, I release. Acknowledgement does not endorse. Release does not erase. You are simply returning objects to their owners, the future to the future, the past to the past. You remain with what never needed, carrying away the breath, the body, the touch of the floor, lifting your weight without complaint. Life never petitioned you to be immaculate. It invited you to learn the choreography of lightness. That dance is not about leaping above circumstance, but stepping with it heel, then ball, then toe, until the music of this minute is audible again. When you pause, the present slips its arm through yours. The quiet you chased in far monasteries was waiting in the steam over your tea, in the small traffic of dust, turning through a ray of sun, in the silence after your name is spoken, and before you answer. Sometimes the simple world refuses to testify on your behalf. Leaves fall like letters you cannot read. The afternoon turns its face. Strangers pour past untranslatable. Unease hums like a wire you can't locate in the walls. You tell yourself that trouble must be proportional to catastrophe, that worry needs a headline before it earns a room. Yet anxiety breeds best in the cracks between events, a glance that missed a sentence, left hanging a plan that won't confirm itself. When the mind cannot find a story, it invents one and then believes its own editing. Remember, mind precedes all things the teaching goes. An untroubled gaze does not change the landscape. It changes the seeing. If the lens steadies, even a city of sirens becomes a city of bells. If the lens rattles, a meadow sounds like war. We suffer not only from what arrives, but from the angle at which we meet it. Expectations tighten the frame. Resistance fogs the glass, but gratitude focuses and curiosity widens the shot until more of the sky fits in. Picture your awareness as a quiet harbor. Boats come in hulls, knocking the boat named shame, the boat named what if, the boat named fatigue. You don't need to row out and sink them. Let them tie up. Let them rest. The tide will change. Harbors do not apologize for water rising and falling. They accept the moon's old terms. So can you. Practice undramatic devotion. When washing a dish, wash this dish, not the career, not the childhood, not the weather next week. When drinking water, drink this water. When laughing, allow the laugh to be a bell tolling you back to yourself. Reverence is not grand, it is precise. Precision is a sanctuary. You are not required to outshout your fear, only to refrain from hiring it as your narrator. You are not required to hold your life together, only to stop holding your life hostage. Let the morning keep doing what morning does, casting gold like quiet confetti on the floorboards, weaving birdsong through the screen door, pointing at the unremarkable miracle of breath. The universe is unembarrassed by its ordinary wonders. You are allowed to be unembarrassed by your ordinary healing. Stand at the threshold and notice how light treats every surface like kin. Touch the doorknob, a small sun. Step into the day as if into a warm current. You will still have hours that snag, conversations that bruise. But carry this. Whatever passes over you is not you. The sky has room for every weather because it refuses to become weather. When you forget, remember that forgetting is also a thing that passes. For now, that is enough. Place the cup in the sink. Let the sparrows keep their chorus. Put your name down gently, like a book you plan to return to. And if the old weight comes back this afternoon, greet it not as a verdict, but as a visitor with poor timing. Offer it a chair by the window. Sit beside it. Breathe until the chair is empty again. Twilight arrives like a tide, turning slow and deliberate. The light doesn't vanish. It simply folds itself into the edges of things, windows, skin, unspoken words. The day exhales. You sit in the hush between what has happened and what might the air thick with undone conversations. The world outside seems wrapped in gauze. The street lamps begin their quiet sermon, and everything begins to glow from within. There's a kind of mercy in this dimness when nothing demands to be seen. Clearly, the heart can finally look at itself. You remember how at noon everything was loud voices, errands, the static of living. Now silence stretches like silk over the hours. The Buddha once said, "Within the still heart, the universe beats." Perhaps silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything else, the soft architecture of awareness itself. When the noise dies down, you notice the finer instruments, the sigh of breath against throat, the pulse at the wrist, the invisible metronome keeping time with the stars. You pour tea again, though not because you need it. The act is a ritual, a conversation between your hands and the moment. The steam curls upward like a spirit remembering how to pray. You watch it vanish mid-air, and it teaches you something that words fail to say. Impermanence doesn't always grieve, it also purifies. To see a thing dissolve completely is to see how complete it already was. The tea was never meant to stay. It was meant to teach you how to let go beautifully. There is a parable whispered in the monasteries about a traveler who carried a jar of honey through a desert. He guarded it with all his strength, fearing thieves and heat alike. When he finally reached the oasis, exhausted and trembling, he opened the jar only to find that the honey had turned to wax. All along, sweetness had been within his own thirst, not the jar. We too carry our jars, names, ambitions, regrets, and mistake the container for the essence. The journey, it seems, was always to remember that even longing can be holy if it teaches you where sweetness truly lives. Outside, the wind begins to move slow, investigative like fingers searching through hair. The leaves answer with a restless applause. You imagine that each leaf is a memory learning to depart gracefully. If you listen closely, the sound of rustling becomes a chorus of farewells. What if loss is the earth's most eloquent language? Every ending it speaks is written in motion. Tides, receding birds, migrating faces turning away. Nothing in nature clings, and yet everything returns in a different form. Even ashes scattered become the ink for new stories. Sometimes solitude feels like an empty stage after the play. The chairs are vacant, the spotlight gone, only the faint smell of dialogue remains. You sit among the ghosts of laughter and realize that even absence has texture. Loneliness is not the enemy. It's the echo that teaches you how sound was made. In that hollow, you can hear the faintest voice, the one you forgot belonged to you. It speaks without language, a steady warmth, a pulse beneath all departures. You are not alone. You are listening to the original companion, awareness itself. In the temple of your body, breath continues its ceremony. Inhale the offering. Exhale the surrender. Each breath is a tide painting the shore of your ribs, erasing yesterday's footprints. You once feared the sea's erasure, but now you understand it's not cruelty, it's renewal. The ocean does not mourn the wave that breaks, it celebrates its return. The mind that resists change lives like a sealed jar in sunlight, eventually cracking from the pressure of its own preservation. But the mind that flows with impermanence expands like a horizon. No walls, no confinement, only a vast permission to begin again. You look toward the horizon where day and night exchange their brief vows. The moment between them, neither light nor dark, is the soul's favorite hour. Here, all opposites bow, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, you and the rest of existence. In that intersection, truth reveals itself not as a sentence, but as a sigh. You realize that enlightenment was never a mountain peak, but a balancing act between steps, being fully here, while everything changes, being the watcher and the watched in the same breath. Once an old calligrapher was asked why his brushstrokes seemed alive, while others looked perfect, but dead. He smiled and said, "Because I write with the breath, not the hand." Each stroke, he explained, began with an inhale and ended only when the exhale disappeared. Art, he said, is not in the ink, it's in the invisible rhythm that guides it. Life, too, is that kind of calligraphy. Every moment asks to be drawn with presence, not perfection. When you rush, the line breaks. When you breathe, the ink sings. A faint rain begins stitching the evening together with silver thread. Each drop seems to write a syllable on the skin of the world. You open the window slightly, and the air that enters smells like renewal. Wet soil, quiet surrender. You think of how rain never chooses where to fall. It blesses equally the garden and the gutter. Compassion, the Buddha taught, is just like this, unconditional, impartial, as natural as gravity. To love what is unlovable is to remember that it too belongs. You light a small candle, not to chase the dark, but to befriend it. Shadows stretch, dance, lean toward the flicker. In their movement, you recognize your own story, how pain once defined you, how fear once shadowed you, and how both now bow to something gentler. The candle does not demand eternal flame. It gives itself in slow offering. That's what compassion looks like when practiced, inwardly steady warmth without noise, light that doesn't need witnesses. Time moves differently now. Minutes melt into one another, like colors bleeding in water. The self that began this day worried, reaching, restless, feels distant, a character you once played convincingly. Perhaps that's the quiet revolution of awareness. It turns the drama into poetry. The same pain remains, but its tone changes. It hums instead of screams. You begin to understand that healing doesn't erase what happened. It reorients your gaze so that even sorrow points toward light. Before bed, you glance at your reflection in the dark window. It's faint, half merged with the night outside. You lift your hand, it lifts too. For the first time, you don't correct the blurriness, you let the reflection remain imperfect, fluid, unanchored. Maybe this is the truest vision of self, a shimmer between being and dissolving, held by both, yet belonging to neither. The moon slides from behind a cloud, and for a moment, your face and the moon share the same pale clarity, two mirrors acknowledging the same emptiness, the same peace. And as the candle breathes its last, you realize nothing truly ends. It only changes languages. The flame becomes warmth, the smoke becomes sky, the wax becomes memory. Life too is fluent in transformation. To live deeply is not to resist the translation, but to trust it. So you whisper not as a prayer, but as recognition. Everything that leaves also arrives elsewhere. Dawn returns quietly, as if the universe were beginning again. For the very first time, the air smells new dew, faint jasmine, and the invisible salt of distance. You open your eyes not to a world transformed, but to a mind softened by the night's gentle forgetting. Somewhere a bird rehearses a single note and then falls silent, as if reconsidering what song means. The stillness between those notes, that's where awareness begins. Not in doing, not in seeking, but in listening to what doesn't demand to be heard. You rise slowly, carrying the calm like a vessel. Every movement feels deliberate. The brush of cloth, the shift of light on the floorboards, the pulse in your wrist reminding you that life has never stopped touching you. The Buddha once spoke of the middle way, not a narrow path, but a wide openness between extremes. You begin to see that balance is not walking a tightrope, but floating in the river's center, where both banks reflect equally. The river carries you whether you struggle or not. The art is in surrendering to its rhythm without calling it surrender. You make your way outside. The world seems held in suspension. The trees like breath paused mid-inhale. The sky unsure if it should brighten or rest. You notice a spider's web stretched between two branches jeweled with dew. The web trembles a world entire within a single thread. You think of how fragile it is, how easily one careless gesture could undo it. And yet, it endures rebuilt every morning. Perhaps resilience isn't the opposite of fragility. Perhaps it's the tenderness that dares to rebuild even when breaking is certain. In the distance, a train passes its low hum, echoing through the morning. You watch it disappear, carrying lives, dreams, and destinations you'll never know. There's something sacred in that, a reminder that your story is one note in a vast symphony, heard only because it vibrates alongside others. Ego wants to be the melody, but wisdom knows it is the silence between sounds that gives music its shape. You don't have to be everything to be whole. You just have to belong to the harmony of what is. You sit beneath a tree whose roots break through the ground like old veins of memory. The bark holds entire histories of storms, sun, and silence. You trace it with your fingers and wonder how many seasons it has witnessed without ever once deciding to flee. The tree never asks, "Why me?" It only stands drinking light, sheltering wings, allowing time to carve its teachings along the grain. We too could live like that, not resisting the seasons that pass through us, but allowing them to write us into wisdom. Somewhere nearby, children begin to laugh. The sound ripples through the air like the first brush of color on blank canvas. You close your eyes and remember laughter from years ago the way it used to come uninvited like a bird landing on your shoulder. Growing older taught you restraint, but perhaps wisdom isn't restraint at all. It's permission to laugh, to grieve, to be moved. Enlightenment is not the absence of emotion, but the intimacy of feeling without drowning. The awakened heart doesn't avoid the storm. It dances inside it and calls the lightning a teacher. As the sun climbs higher, shadows start to take form. They stretch long and thin across the ground, gentle reminders that light and darkness are not enemies. They are partners, choreographing the world's depth. You look at your own shadow, a quiet twin following faithfully. There was a time you feared it, mistaking its presence for flaw. But the shadow too is holy. Without it, form would flatten. Without contrast, beauty would blur. Even your sorrow, when seen from wisdom's height, is a kind of shade, a place where compassion can rest and cool itself. A breeze passes. The leaves above you stir like thoughts awakening. You think of all the people who have entered and left your life, each like a leaf once green, now carried elsewhere. Attachment taught you to call their departure loss, but awareness teaches you to call it movement. The tree doesn't chase the leaf that falls. It trusts the cycle that returns it as nourishment. When you can love without owning, when you can release without bitterness, You begin to love as the universe loves, without agenda, without fear of scarcity. There's a pond nearby, still and unassuming. You approach it and see the world inverted, the sky resting beneath the surface, the clouds drifting below. A single pebble could ripple the heavens. You realize then that perception works the same way one thought, and the entire sky of consciousness trembles. To keep the water still is not to stop living, but to see clearly through each disturbance. Meditation, then, is not a fortress built against waves. It's learning to float above their rhythm without mistaking motion for meaning. You take a pebble, smooth and small, and drop it into the pond. Circles bloom outward, soft, inevitable. Watching them, you understand karma, not as punishment or debt, but as the natural unfolding of influence. Every word, every gesture, every silence leaves its ring upon the water of existence. None vanish, all become part of the larger pattern. The kindest act is to ripple gently, to move through the world, as if each step were writing a poem on the skin of water. What you leave behind should shimmer, not scar. You stand again, noticing how the light has changed. The morning has ripened into a bright, forgiving blue. You feel lighter, though nothing tangible has altered. That is the quiet alchemy of mindfulness. It doesn't rewrite the script, it changes the reader. You realize that healing is not fixing what was broken, but remembering you were never only the crack. You are also the space through which light enters. A distant bell rings its tone clear, dissolving into the air like incense. You imagine the sound traveling through countless ears, reaching strangers you'll never meet. The bell's echo is like compassion. It moves outward, invisible yet felt. To live with awareness is to be such a bell, resonant, sincere, allowing your presence to ripple quietly into the world. You may never see its reach, but that's the beauty of unseen kindness. It returns in forms you no longer need to recognize. You begin to walk home, the earth soft underfoot. Each step feels like punctuation, a gentle reminder that the sentence of life is written one footprint at a time. You think of the ancient teaching, walk, as if you are kissing the earth with your feet. You try it once, just once, and the ground responds warm, forgiving, alive. Perhaps enlightenment is not a destination, but this a single conscious step taken without hurry, without fear, without forgetting that you belong to everything you touch. The sky has opened fully now, vast and clean. A hawk circles high above, drawing invisible calligraphy across the clouds. You watch until it becomes a dot, and then nothing at all. Yet even as it vanishes, you can still feel the movement in your chest, a silent echo of flight. Some part of you knows you've always been that bird, and the sky has always been your nature. Afternoon descends with the quiet weight of a silk curtain. The sunlight no longer burns. It lingers warm and slow, as if reluctant to leave the skin of the world. Dust motes drift lazily through the air, tiny planets orbiting the stillness. Everything moves, yet nothing hurries. You sit by the open window, watching the rhythm of life unfold without script. The hum of existence softens until it feels almost sacred, as though the universe itself were exhaling after a long recital. The scent of ripe fruit fills the room. Mango, plum, something sweetly transient. You pick one up, trace its shape, and think of how every fruit carries both beginning and ending in its flesh, blossom and decay, sweetness and seed. To taste is to participate in that sacred paradox. The Buddha taught that to truly live, one must taste deeply without clinging. You realize then joy is not meant to be preserved. Like fruit, it must ripen, dissolve, and return to soil. What spoils is not impermanence, but our resistance to its flavor. a memory surfaces your mother's hands peeling an orange. The scent of citrus, the soft, tearing sound, the generosity of that gesture. She never kept the best slice for herself. That small act, unnoticed at the time, was the first Dharma lesson you ever received. Compassion rarely arrives dressed as wisdom. It comes disguised as tenderness, as small kindnesses that leave their fragrance long after the fruit is gone. Outside, the street glows with afternoon light. People move like fragments of a dream, each wrapped in private weather. You realize how invisible everyone's stories are, how much unseen courage walks beside you in every crowd. The woman hurrying past might be nursing a grief no one notices. The old man on the bench could be a monument of endurance in disguise. The world is full of silent bodhisattvas, ordinary beings who turn their pain into quiet service. You bow inwardly, an act of recognition rather than reverence. From the kitchen, the kettle begins to murmur. The sound is small, but it holds the weight of centuries. Every cup of tea poured in stillness. Every monk who ever watched steam curl into enlightenment. You pour hot water over loose leaves. They dance briefly, then settle like thoughts during meditation. The fragrance that rises is both ancient and immediate. You sip, and it feels like the universe shrinking to a single precise sweetness on your tongue. In that sip, you understand presence to meet one moment so completely that nothing else can exist. On the wall, a clock ticks softly, a reminder that even silence has a rhythm. Time doesn't take from you, it shapes you. Each second chisels the marble of your becoming. You used to see time as a thief, but now you see it as a sculptor carving away what you no longer need. The passing of moments is not loss, it's refinement. Eternity, you begin to understand, is not endless duration. It's complete presence within a single instant. A breeze stirs the curtains, carrying with it the smell of rain before it arrives. The sky gathers its breath, and the first drops fall like hesitant confessions. You reach out your hand, letting the coolness bead upon your skin. Each drop is a universe returning to itself. You think of how rain never chooses its destination. It falls equally upon palace and field, sinner and saint. Compassion, too, must fall without preference. True kindness is not an act of choice, but an act of nature. Thunder rolls distantly, not as a warning, but as an ancient drumbeat reminding the heart to stay awake. The world, even in chaos, speaks rhythm. Lightning cuts through the clouds, writing invisible sutras across the dark. You feel no fear, only awe. What is fear after all but misread wonder? Every flash, every storm, every trembling of the earth is the same lesson. In new costume, change will come, and it will not ask your permission. You stand at the doorway, watching the rain thicken into a translucent curtain. The street turns to mirror. Reflections of trees and lamps quiver like souls rediscovering their shape. A child runs barefoot into the puddles, laughing with unrestrained joy. For a moment, the world remembers its innocence. You smile not because you envy that freedom, but because you recognize it. That child is your own heart, unafraid of getting wet, unafraid of the mess that joy makes. The rain deepens. The rhythm against the roof becomes meditation itself. Each drop a mantra, each sound a pulse in the temple of the world. You close your eyes and let the sound dissolve the edges of thought. There is no inside or outside now, only falling, only flow. The rain doesn't distinguish between roof and ground, and neither does awareness. Everything belongs equally soaked in the baptism of impermanence. When the storm softens, a scent rises from the earth, wet soil, green renewal. The air feels newly washed, forgiving. Leaves glisten like they've been reminded of their purpose. You step outside. The world seems fragile and reborn at once. Mud clings to your feet, and you let it. This too is belonging to be unclean, and yet completely accepted by the ground you stand on. You pass a puddle and see the sky resting within it, a small, trembling heaven held by a shallow hollow in the road. You crouch down, realizing something profound. Even the lowest places can hold the infinite. Pain, too, has that ability to reflect what is vast when it finally stops struggling to be small. You whisper a silent gratitude not for suffering itself, but for the depth it created the space within you that can now hold both rain and light. A dragonfly lands nearby, its wings trembling like glass music. You watch it hover, weightless yet deliberate. Its life is brief, measured in days, and yet it flies as if forever were stitched into each second. That is its enlightenment, to burn brightly fully without regret. You wonder if the length of life matters at all, or if the intensity of presence is the only real measure. Perhaps eternity is simply a dragonfly's wing, caught in sunlight, fragile, fleeting, flawless. As dusk begins to settle, you return indoors. The room smells faintly of rain and warmth. The candle you left earlier has melted into a small lake of wax, its wick still bravely burning. You sit beside it and listen to the faint hiss of flame meeting air. The light flickers against the walls, and for a moment, it looks like the walls are breathing with you. You realize you're not observing the world anymore. You're participating in its inhale and exhale. The Buddha said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." But now, you see it differently. What you truly see, you already are. The rain, the flame, the laughter, the silence, all are mirrors pointing back to the same truth. You are not separate from what you witness. To see clearly is to remember that the watcher and the watched share the same heartbeat. The storm fades into the sound of crickets. You lie down, the smell of earth still in the air, the whisper of wind still at the window. Sleep comes not as escape, but as surrender, another form of meditation. You drift between breaths, between worlds where consciousness folds itself like wings for rest. Tomorrow will unfold again as it always does, but tonight you are content to dissolve into this tender darkness where nothing must be named to be holy. Night arrives not as an ending, but as a listener. It spreads across the world like ink dissolving in water, silent yet complete. The rain has stopped, leaving behind a silence so pure it feels sacred. Windows reflect fragments of distant stars, each one trembling slightly, as if unsure whether it belongs to the sky or the earth. You stand at the threshold between day and dream, sensing that something vast has arrived, not outside, but within. The air holds the scent of wet earth and jasmine, a mingling of surrender and beginning. You sit by the window candle flickering beside you. In the small circle of light, even your shadow seems contemplative. You realize that night is not the absence of light, it's the womb of it. Every dawn is born here in the quiet darkness no one celebrates. Growth, healing, awakening all happen when seen things dissolve into unseen hands. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, twice, then the world settles again. The city sleeps like a giant creature breathing beneath its blanket of lights. You think of how existence has its own pulse heartbeat, hidden in the hum of faraway electricity, in the slow turn of planets, in the quiet ticking of your own wrist. Awareness is the ability to hear this invisible rhythm, to sense the universe inhaling and exhaling through you. You light a stick of incense. Smoke begins to rise, thin and serpentine, forming shapes that vanish faster than thought. It reminds you of memory, how it appears vivid for a moment, then drifts back into formlessness. You once feared forgetting, but now you see it as mercy. To forget is to make room for the present. The mind, when too full, cannot receive the fragrance of new moments. Wisdom is not in collecting, it's in clearing space for the next breath to arrive. A moth circles the candle. Its wings shimmer like old silk drawn irresistibly toward the flame. You watch, torn between wonder and concern. The flame dances higher, as if flattered by attention. You realize this is desire in its purest form, beauty chasing beauty, unaware of danger. How often we too fly toward what burns us, believing warmth is love, the Buddha once said. The fire that consumes is not in the world, it is in our clinging. You cup your hand around the candle, and the moth, perhaps grateful, drifts away. Compassion, you learn, is sometimes the courage to dim your own light for another's safety. You lie back, watching the ceiling glow faintly with moonlight. The shadows of the window frame form a soft grid across the wall, like bars of light in reverse. You imagine your thoughts as birds resting quietly on those lines, some asleep, some stirring, some already preparing to fly at dawn. You do not chase them, not tonight. You let them perch where they will. Freedom, you discover, is not in having no thoughts, but in not being trapped by their song. Outside, the night deepens. Crickets begin their orchestral prayer, each chirp a thread, weaving through the dark fabric of silence. Somewhere far away, a train sighs its echo, unraveling across the hills. The world feels immense, yet intimate. You could reach out and touch the edges of the cosmos, or simply your own heartbeat. It's all the same touch. You think of the teachings you've read, the sutras that spoke of emptiness. Once emptiness frightened you. It sounded like loss, like vanishing. But tonight, it feels different, alive, tender breathing. Emptiness, you now understand, isn't the absence of life. It's the space that allows everything to exist. The cup is useful because it is empty. The music moves you because silence surrounds it. In this stillness, you feel yourself dissolving, not into nothingness, but into belonging. A memory surfaces, walking through a forest as a child holding a lantern, too small for the dark path. You remember how the trees looked endless, how every step forward revealed only the next few inches of ground, and yet you always arrived. Life, you realize, is the same. The path only appears as you walk it. Faith isn't believing in a destination. It's trusting the light you carry, however small. The moon climbs higher, silver and patient. Clouds drift around it like monks in slow meditation. You find yourself whispering a question to the night. What is the purpose of all this longing? The silence answers with a feeling, not a word. Longing is how the heart practices love before it learns peace. Desire, when softened by awareness, becomes devotion. And devotion, when freed from grasping, becomes serenity. A breeze moves through the open window. The candle flickers once, twice, then steadies. You close your eyes and feel the night enter your lungs. Each inhale is the world arriving. Each exhale, the world departing. Breathing, it seems, is the most intimate conversation between self and universe. You are not separate. You never were. The stars you gaze upon are the same elements burning quietly in your blood. What you call you is simply the universe remembering itself for a moment before returning to silence. You stay there for a long time, not meditating, not thinking, just being. And in that being, something shifts. The mind loosens its grip, the body softens, and time itself feels like it is kneeling beside you. The night listens, and in its listening, you discover your own stillness. Listening back, there's no boundary anymore, only awareness, aware of awareness. The candle finally sighs out, leaving the faint scent of smoke, a whisper that says, "Everything ends beautifully when it ends naturally." You lie in the dark, unafraid, knowing that every extinction is also a beginning, dressed in different light. Morning breaks as if the world were exhaling from a long-held breath. The first light creeps in through the curtains, hesitant yet hopeful, painting the walls in a hue that feels halfway between gold and forgiveness. You open your eyes, not because you are restless, but because the day itself seems to be calling your name. There is no sound, only the quiet insistence of light, touching the edges of your face, a reminder that even after darkness, radiance returns as if it never left. The air is cool, carrying a scent that's part dust, part sunlight, part dream. You stretch, feeling the body as both ancient and new, every bone a small prayer, every breath an answered one. Somewhere in that stretch, you realize how miraculous it is to wake again. You've crossed another invisible bridge between night and day, death and rebirth, sleep and awareness. Perhaps this too is what the Buddha meant by little deaths, the countless moments we dissolve into stillness, only to rise renewed. You pour water into a bowl and watch it ripple. The reflection trembles, breaking your face into moving fragments. For a moment, you look unrecognizable. And yet, isn't that what life does to us? Every day, a different wave reshaping the reflection, erasing the certainty of who we think we are. You dip your hands into the water, it feels like touching impermanence itself. Cold, alive, fleeting. The droplets slide down your wrist, glinting like transparent jewels before they vanish into the air. On the windowsill, a plant bends toward the light. Its leaves are not perfect, one is torn, another fading, but it reaches anyway. You touch it gently and feel the quiet lesson it offers. To grow does not mean to remain flawless. It means to move toward light despite your bruises. You realize too that compassion for oneself is not indulgence. It's sunlight for the soul. Without it, even the strongest roots will starve in shadow. Outside, the city wakes. The hum of life begins, brooms brushing pavement, a distant vendor calling out the day's bread, a child's laughter carried on wind. Each sound feels like a heartbeat of the world, and your pulse finds its rhythm within that symphony. You've spent so much of life chasing purpose, but now you begin to understand purpose isn't a finish line, it's a state of participation. To live consciously is already to serve existence. You prepare tea again, not out of habit, but reverence. Steam rises in soft spirals, vanishing into the ceiling like whispered mantras. You take a sip, slow and mindful. The warmth flows through you, subtle but awakening. Every flavor, the bitterness, the sweetness, the trace of smoke reminds you that life too is not meant to be one taste. The art is in savoring even what stings, knowing that each note contributes to the harmony of being alive. A thought surfaces. Who am I becoming? It's a question that once carried anxiety, but today it feels light, almost tender. You realize you're not becoming someone, you're unbecoming everything that is not you. The layers of fear, comparison, ambition, they fall away like petals from a flower, no longer pretending to bloom. Beneath it all, what remains is simple awareness, unadorned, sufficient, quietly radiant. A bird lands on the railing outside your window, a small one, gray with a streak of blue. It tilts its head as if examining the world for the first time. Then it sings one clear note, brief but whole. You listen, and something opens inside you, something wordless and immense. In that instant, you understand prayer not as asking, not as praising, but as becoming utterly present to beauty when it chooses to arrive. You decide to walk. The air outside carries the aftertaste of last night's rain. The ground gleams in patches reflecting the newborn sun. Each step feels deliberate, sacred. A dog trots by, tail wagging, and you smile at the simple honesty of its joy. How uncomplicated happiness can be when not weighed down by expectation. Joy, you realize, is not an achievement. It's a condition of alignment, a resonance between your heart and the moment. The path leads you to a small park. There, a gardener kneels, trimming the edges of a hedge with patient precision. His movements are unhurried, like a monk tending to prayer flags. You watch him for a while, noticing how each cut creates symmetry, not by perfection, but by care. You think of how awareness does the same within you, trimming the overgrowth of thought, shaping chaos into clarity. The gardener doesn't rush. He trusts the form will reveal itself through devotion. A breeze passes, carrying with it petals from a tree in bloom. They drift down like soft fragments of memory, resting briefly before vanishing into the soil. You catch one midair, it feels like silk, then nothing. That's how time touches us. You think gently, briefly, irrevocably. You can't hold the moment. You can only hold your attention. And attention, when pure, is the bridge between the fleeting and the eternal. You find a bench and sit. The light has deepened, no longer gold, but a clear white, precise and calm. It fills everything without preference, without hierarchy. You look at your hands resting on your lap and think, this is what peace looks like, not the absence of movement, but the presence of stillness within it. The world continues around you. Children laughing, leaves trembling, traffic murmuring, but inside a vast silence hums like a steady note beneath all sound. You close your eyes. The breath moves in and out, unforced. You sense the boundaries between self and space begin to blur again. Thoughts arise and pass like clouds, rearranging themselves into endless shapes. In this state, time feels optional. You are not counting minutes, you are inhabiting eternity, moment by moment. Awareness becomes both ocean and wave, observer and observed. When you open your eyes again, the world hasn't changed, and yet it feels transparent, luminous, as though everything is made of the same gentle substance as light itself. You stand and begin to walk home, each step dissolving into gratitude. The trees, the wind, the laughter of strangers, all of it feels like an ancient poem repeating itself through your senses. And somewhere within a voice without words speaks, you are not walking toward enlightenment. You are walking as enlightenment. The thought lingers like incense in the air. You smile not because you understand, but because understanding is no longer necessary. The light shifts softer now, leaning toward afternoon. The shadows lengthen, not as warnings, but as reminders that even radiance needs rest. You bow slightly to no one, to everything, and whisper a thank you to the unseen rhythm that keeps the world breathing. Then quietly, you continue walking your body, a prayer, your steps, an offering. By afternoon, the air has grown gentle again. The rain from yesterday has turned the earth supple, almost musical beneath your feet. You walk through the narrow path that leads toward the outskirts of the city, where the noise dissolves and the fields begin. The world here feels different, less performed, more honest. Crickets sing from the grass, like tiny monks chanting sutras, and a line of clouds drift lazily, unbothered by purpose. You stop before an old garden gate. Its paint chipped its hinges, singing faintly when touched. Pushing it open, you find yourself surrounded by wildflowers that refuse symmetry, each one blooming in its own tempo, facing whichever direction light allows. This, you think, must be what freedom looks like, not order, but belonging. Every stem, every petal imperfect and utterly necessary to the whole. There's an old stone bench at the garden's center. You sit tracing your fingers over the moss-covered surface. The coolness grounds you, the scent of green and earth curling around your breath. A butterfly flutters past unhurried, then another follows. They dance in the air, like two thoughts finally learning not to collide. You realize how rarely you allow life to move with such grace, without control, without agenda, simply trusting that each motion knows its destination. A gardener appears from behind a tree, silent and unassuming, his face, a map of years spent in sunlight. He nods politely and continues trimming a bush nearby. His hands are slow, deliberate, tender. You watch him work, realizing that care is its own form of meditation. He does not hurry because he's not chasing completion. In his world, every act, each cut, each sweep of soil is an act of presence. The garden will never be finished, and that's the beauty of it. You pick up a fallen leaf. It's yellow at the edges, veins, like delicate rivers branching toward the inevitable. The wind lifts it briefly from your palm before returning it to the ground. You smile. There's something comforting about that surrender, the way nature accepts decline, not as tragedy, but as part of its choreography. The leaf doesn't resist gravity. It completes its dance. Maybe that's what peace truly is, not avoidance of fall, but the elegance of landing. In the corner of the garden stands a small pond, its surface perfectly still, holding the reflection of the sky like a secret it promises not to tell. You kneel beside it. The reflection stares back your face, the clouds, the slow movement of time itself. For a moment, you see everything as one undisturbed image. But then a dragonfly dips to touch the surface, and the vision ripples apart. Strangely, the beauty increases. What was perfect becomes alive. Stillness, you understand, isn't the absence of movement, it's harmony with it. You remember a teaching you once read. The echo exists because the mountain allows it. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere nearby, a bird sings, and the sound repeats faintly across the hills. You begin to hear echoes everywhere, in the rustle of trees, in the hum of distant roads, even in your own heartbeat returning to your ears. The universe, it seems, is one great conversation of call and response. Nothing truly disappears. It simply returns in a different tone. A thought arises, perhaps compassion is also an echo. What you give gently or fiercely always finds its way back. Not immediately, not visibly, but inevitably. Every act of kindness is a sound wave traveling through the unseen dimensions of time. You cannot measure its journey, but you can trust its arrival. That faith alone is enough to keep the heart soft. The sun moves lower now, casting long shadows across the grass. The gardener straightens up, wiping his hands on his worn trousers. He smiles at you. No words, just that quiet acknowledgement between two beings who have touched the same silence. He points to a corner of the garden where young saplings have been planted. Their stems are thin, their leaves trembling, but they hold the promise of shade for generations to come. They'll take years, he says, his voice calm, but time doesn't mind waiting when something grows with sincerity. You nod, understanding more than the words. Growth, you realize, is never hurried by wisdom. Everything unfolds at the speed of trust. The seed does not rush toward bloom. It expands precisely when the soil, the sun, and the rain agree. Patience, then, is not delay. It's alignment. A soft wind passes, stirring the chimes hung near the gate. Their sound fills the air, clear, delicate, vanishing almost as soon as it's born. Each note feels like a message from the unseen. You are exactly where you need to be. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash through you, carrying with it something old and nameless. Maybe memory, maybe healing. When you open your eyes, the light has begun to shift again, tinged now with amber. The butterflies have gone replaced by fireflies blinking awake in the tall grass. Their brief sparks resemble scattered thoughts, returning home to silence. The gardener gathers his tools and waves goodbye. You remain seated, watching the fireflies turn the dusk into a breathing constellation. You think of how the mind, too, is like this garden, sometimes wild, sometimes tended, always alive. Thoughts bloom and fade, emotions rise and fall, yet beneath it all, consciousness remains fertile, patient, waiting. Enlightenment isn't about silencing the mind. It's about learning to garden within it, to prune gently, to water with attention, to let go of what has finished flowering. As the last light fades, you stand. The air hums softly, neither day nor night, just a brief, exquisite in-between. You close the gate behind you, feeling its weight, hearing the faint sigh of hinges like a closing mantra. The scent of earth follows you as you walk, a reminder that everything you touch continues speaking long after you've left. On your way home, you glance back once. The garden glows faintly in the dark, lit by the quiet persistence of fireflies. And in that glow, you sense something eternal, not in the flowers or the soil, but in the stillness that holds them both. The same stillness that breathes through you, timeless and listening. You whisper a silent vow to return not to the garden, but to that inner space where echoes grow into silence, and silence blossoms into peace. By the time you return to the river, the world has folded into a hush that feels almost sacred. The late afternoon sun stretches long fingers of light across the water, turning every ripple into a language of gold. The current moves with the calm assurance of something that has never needed to hurry. You stand on the bank, the soil soft beneath your feet, and feel the river breathing steady, eternal, indifferent to beginnings or ends. You kneel to touch the surface. The water is cool, deliberate, as if aware of your presence. It accepts your fingers without question, without judgment. You wonder if the river recognizes you not as a person, but as a pulse of the same infinite life. The Buddha once said, "No one steps into the same river twice," and now you understand it's not because the water changes, but because you do. You are no longer the one who came seeking. You are the one who listens. Across the bank, reeds sway in unison, whispering secrets to the wind. Each movement seems to repeat the same mantra. Everything flows. Everything returns. The river carries leaves, petals, fragments of light, all surrendering to its direction without resistance. How different it is from the human heart, which tries to hold even what was never meant to stay. Watching the current, you realize how exhausting it has been to swim against time. Freedom isn't found in control, it's found in alignment. A fisherman sits nearby, his face weathered but peaceful. He casts his line with an ease that feels like prayer. The hook vanishes beneath the surface, yet he does not watch it anxiously. He simply waits, eyes soft, body still. You can sense it, the kind of patience that comes only from trust. The river knows what to give and when. You think maybe meditation is exactly this, the art of waiting without wanting, of resting inside uncertainty until it becomes grace. A dragonfly hovers close, its wings trembling with the light of the dying sun. It hovers, lands on a reed, and then lifts again, weightless, precise, unafraid. You envy its clarity, the way it lives each second, as though eternity were folded within it. Then it occurs to you perhaps it does not know clarity. It is clarity. The mind seeks what the heart already is. You smile, feeling the thought dissolve before it can become a cage. A gentle wind rises and the surface of the water transforms. Waves form, overlap, vanish. You watch, realizing that thought works the same way, one ripple birthing the next, none lasting, all dependent on the wind of attention. Stillness is not the absence of thought. It is the seeing of their nature. You exhale, and the river seems to exhale with you. Somewhere downstream, a child laughs a sound bright enough to reach across distance. You look toward it and see a small figure tossing stones into the current. Each splash sends up a ring of silver circles, widening, fading, merging. The child laughs again, as if delighted by impermanence. You envy that innocence, then suddenly recognize it within yourself. The world has never stopped inviting you to play. You've simply mistaken reverence for restraint. You pick up a small stone, smooth and round the color of dusk. You toss it gently into the river. The ripples spread outward, touching reeds, touching sky, touching everything. You realize in that instant that even the smallest gesture reverberates beyond its origin. Compassion is like that, a single act expanding endlessly through unseen dimensions. You will never trace its end, and that's precisely why it's holy. As you walk along the riverbank, you notice how each bend reveals a new perspective, new light, new rhythm. The path itself seems alive, responding to your pace. You think of your own life, how often you've tried to keep it straight, predictable, safe. But rivers don't apologize for their meandering. They bend because they listen to the land. What if the detours you once cursed were actually the shape of wisdom, the way life flows around resistance? A heron stands motionless in the shallows, its reflection almost indistinguishable from its body. You watch it waiting for a fish that may never come, but it does not seem concerned. Its stillness radiates something deeper than patience. Its participation. The bird is not separate from the river. It is part of the waiting, part of the silence, part of the unbroken conversation between hunger and grace. You close your eyes and feel it, the vast humility of being part of something immeasurable. The air begins to cool. The sun dips lower, turning the river into molten bronze. You sit on a rock, watching as light and shadow braid themselves together, inseparable. The reflection of the sky in the water looks like memory, vivid, yet unreachable. You realize that memories too flow like rivers. We try to hold them still, but even recollection changes each time we touch it. What you remember is not the past itself, but the echo of the heart that once felt it. You dip your hands into the current once more. The water slides through your fingers, effortless, unstoppable. In that texture, you feel every life that has ever existed, every drop, once a tear, a rainfall, a sea. You whisper a small prayer without words, a gesture more than sound, gratitude for being here, for being temporary, for being allowed to dissolve into the great circulation of things. Above you, the first stars appear. Their reflections shimmer in the moving water, turning the river into a sky that flows. You cannot tell anymore which direction is up, which is down. Heaven and earth have traded places, as they often do when the mind is quiet. The fisherman gathers his net, nods toward you, and disappears down the path. You stay a while longer until the world is only sound. The hush of current, the chorus of night insects, the slow heartbeat of time. Then gently, you rise. As you walk away, you realize the river is still moving behind you, carrying your reflection downstream, carrying the echoes of your breath, carrying everything you were willing to release. You don't look back. You don't need to. The river remembers. By the next morning, you find yourself drawn to the mountains, their outlines distant blue and unmoving. There is something about their stillness that feels older than memory, as if the world itself were leaning against their patience. You begin the ascent at dawn, when the mist still wraps the trees like forgotten silk, and the air tastes of stone and quiet. Every step feels like a dialogue between wait and surrender, between the earth and your heartbeat. The path winds upward, narrow and honest. Dew clings to the blades of grass, each drop a tiny lens reflecting entire universes. A bird calls somewhere above, and the sound folds back upon itself, caught in the valley's echo. You pause, letting the silence after the call deepen around you. It feels like listening to the space between thoughts, the hidden chamber where understanding sleeps before it awakens. The climb is slow, deliberate. Rocks shift beneath your feet, teaching balance through unpredictability. Sometimes you stop, not from fatigue, but to witness. The forest opens in brief clearings, where sunlight filters through leaves like liquid gold, where the air trembles with unseen hymns. You begin to sense the pulse of the mountain, not a sound, but a rhythm beneath your soles. It breathes. You feel it, the subtle expansion and contraction of the earth, steady as compassion. Halfway up, you find an old shrine carved into the stone. Its edges are worn, its offerings long gone, but the air still hums with reverence. Someone once knelt here. Someone once whispered hopes into this rock. You place your hand against it and feel warmth, faint but real, as if time itself had memory. You think of all the prayers ever spoken, how most dissolve unanswered, yet none are wasted. Words offered with sincerity never vanish. They return as wind or rain or intuition. You sit near the shrine and drink from your flask. The water tastes sharper here, clearer, like the mountain has purified it on its way down. Each sip feels like communion, each breath like confession. You begin to notice how silence is never empty. It is dense, alive, crowded with presence. The mountain doesn't speak in words, but in patience and endurance, in the long grammar of stone. As you resume walking, the forest thins. Trees grow smaller, bent by years of wind, their branches sculpted into gestures of resilience. Moss covers the rocks in green softness, a silent kindness that asks for nothing in return. You step carefully, and for a moment, it feels as if the mountain itself were carrying you, guiding you toward its secret heart. At the next turn, you meet a shepherd resting with his flock. His face is lined with sun and simplicity, his eyes clear as river water. He greets you with a nod, offering a piece of bread. You share it in silence. Crumbs fall to the ground, and the sheep nuzzle them gently. You realize that holiness doesn't always wear robes or speak in sutras. It can sit quietly beside you, chewing bread, listening to wind. Before leaving, the shepherd says only one thing. The summit doesn't speak, but it hears everything. You continue upward, his words, following you like a mantra. The trail narrows until only your breath keeps you company. The higher you go, the thinner the air becomes, and yet you feel lighter. Each inhalation is an offering, each exhalation a surrender. Sweat trickles down your spine, but even that feels sacred, a baptism of effort, a reminder that the body too is a temple built for pilgrimage. Finally, you reach a plateau. The view opens like a revelation. Valleys stretch endlessly below rivers, glint like silver veins. Clouds drift at eye level, luminous and slow. You sit, unable to speak. The wind moves through your hair, cool and deliberate, as if it knows you by name. Here, words dissolve into awe. The mountain, unmovable and immense, says nothing, and yet everything. You close your eyes. Beneath the hum of wind, you hear it, a deep, resonant vibration, like the world chanting its own mantra. You realize it's not the mountain making the sound, it's your heartbeat syncing with it. The illusion of separation flickers and fades. You are no longer climbing. You are being breathed by the mountain, exhaled into its sky, inhaled into its stillness. You remember the shepherd's words. The summit doesn't speak, but it hears everything. You finally understand. The summit isn't a place, it's a state. It's the silence that listens to all voices, the awareness that witnesses without naming. Enlightenment isn't about reaching higher ground. It's about realizing that the ground beneath every step was sacred all along. A hawk circles above its wings, wide against the vast emptiness. You watch it glide effortlessly without flapping, carried by invisible currents. You think of how you've spent years trying to control your flight, exhausting yourself in the process. The hawk knows better, it trusts the unseen air. You breathe, and in that breath, you release another layer of striving. The sun begins to descend, and the mountain's shadow stretches across the valley, like an old memory returning home. You stay seated, letting the temperature drop, watching the world shift from brilliance to softness. The silence thickens, then deepens, then disappears into itself. You realize you are no longer watching the mountain, you are watching from within it. The same patience that shapes stone shapes your breath. The same stillness that holds centuries holds this moment. There is no difference between the rock and your bones, between the wind and your thoughts. Everything belongs to the same vast listening. When darkness arrives, it does not frighten you. You know now that even the mountain rests inhaling the stars. You bow gently, not to a deity, but to the quiet mystery that allows you to exist. Then slowly, you begin the descent, each step lighter, each breath freer, as though the mountain has exhaled you back into the world. Behind you, the wind carries a low murmur through the pines, almost like a voice. If you listen closely, it sounds like gratitude, though you cannot tell whether it comes from you or from the mountain. You descend the mountain under a sky that is neither night nor morning, just a blue so deep it feels infinite. The air is cool and alive, each breath carrying whispers from the heights you've left behind. The forest receives you like a slow heartbeat, steady and vast. You walk with a kind of reverence that asks for no audience, the rhythm of your steps blending with the rustle of pine needles and the distant hum of unseen life. At the base of the mountain, the path opens to a wide valley. There, tucked between stones and wild grasses, stands a small temple, its wooden beams silvered by rain, its prayer flags faded into quiet colors. You hadn't planned to stop, but the air around it feels deliberate, as though the wind itself has paused to listen. You step closer. The temple doors stand slightly ajar. Inside, incense coils upward in slow spirals, stitching the space between the seen and the unseen. Each curl of smoke bends, lingers, and disappears into the rafters, like thoughts returning to their source. The floorboards creak under your feet, soft as the breath of age. You bow slightly, not to the statue at the altar, but to the stillness that lives here, an ancient kind of silence that feels aware of every sound you've ever made. You sit on the wooden floor. The air is thick with the scent of cedar and ashes. A single candle burns before the figure of the Buddha, its flame trembling but unafraid. You watch it mesmerized. The wax pools slowly, the wick shortens, yet the light persists. You begin to understand why monks call this the teaching of impermanence. Every moment burns itself away to illuminate the next. Outside, the wind shifts, brushing against the paper windows with a sound like gentle hands. You realize that this temple is alive, not in the way bodies are, but in the way awareness breathes through wood and air and silence. The walls have learned the art of listening. The roof hums with prayers whispered centuries ago. You close your eyes and sense it, the hum of wind becoming chant, the pulse of your heart aligning with it. When you open your eyes again, an old monk is standing in the doorway. His robe is simple, his presence unforced. He looks at you for a long moment, then smiles the kind of smile that contains both invitation and farewell. Without speaking, he sits beside you. The candle flickers between you like a shared heartbeat. After a while, he asks softly, "What have you come to leave behind?" You hesitate. The question feels heavier than it sounds. You think of your worries, your desires, your unfinished stories. But when you open your mouth, none of those words appear. What comes out instead is silence. You look at the flame, then back at him. He nods as if you've answered perfectly. "Then you have already begun," he says. He stands, takes a small bowl from the altar, and fills it with water from a clay pot. Handing it to you, he gestures toward the open door. "The wind will know what to do," he says, and walks away. You step outside. The valley stretches before you, green and endless. You lift the bowl, tilting it slowly. The water spills out, carried instantly by the breeze. Droplets scatter like crystal dust, vanishing into air. You watch them disappear, and something inside you loosens the need to hold, the need to name, the need to be certain. The release is so quiet, it feels like prayer. The wind rises, then gentle but insistent. It moves through the valley like a great invisible tide, brushing across your face, threading through your hair, lifting the edges of your clothes. For a moment, you feel as if you are made entirely of breath. The air passes through you rather than around you. You are no longer the one who breathes, but the one being breathed. You begin to walk again, letting the wind guide you. It pulls the scent of pine and soil, the faint echo of the monk's bell, the laughter of distant children, all merging into a single fluid hymn. You start to hear rhythm where once there was only noise. The world, you realize, has never been silent. It has only been waiting for your listening to deepen. In the distance, a field of tall grass shivers under the sky. The wind bends each blade, but none break. You stop to watch, noticing how they bow together, each movement separate, yet harmonized by the same invisible conductor. You remember the monk's words, "The wind will know what to do." Perhaps surrender isn't giving up. Perhaps it's becoming part of that harmony. You raise your arms slightly, letting the breeze flow against your palms. The sensation is intimate, almost sentient. It feels like touching time itself, soft, endless, forgiving. The body you've carried for so long no longer feels like a boundary. It feels like an instrument through which the universe plays its quiet music. You walk until you reach a ridge overlooking the entire valley. From here, the world expands into a great expanse of motion and stillness. The river below catches the last of the light, shimmering like a living mirror. Clouds drift low, heavy with rain not yet fallen. The horizon glows faintly, as though the earth were blushing beneath the touch of sky. The wind circles you once more tenderly, as if recognizing an old friend. You close your eyes and whisper into it, not a wish, not a prayer, but a simple acknowledgement. I am listening. The wind answers by lifting, swirling around you, carrying your words into places you'll never see. When you open your eyes, the temple is barely visible behind the trees. The candle's glow flickers faintly through the open door, then fades as dusk gathers. You realize that enlightenment may not be a flash of light, but the quiet acceptance that everything, including the light, must eventually dissolve into wind. You stand there until the first drops of rain arrive, soft and deliberate, touching your face like reminders that even clouds must release their weight. You smile, close your eyes, and let the wind and rain finish the teaching that words could never hold. The valley hums with a low, eternal rhythm. The air itself seems to bow, and somewhere deep within that rhythm, your heart joins the chant, not as a voice, but as an echo of the wind that remembers its own silence. When you return from the valley, the city greets you differently. It is the same place, the same restless pulse of life, the same overlapping noises, yet something within you no longer resists it. The sound of traffic becomes a mantra. Footsteps echo like rain against pavement. Even the distant cry of a street vendor feels like a bell calling you back to presence. You realize that peace was never hiding in the mountains. It was always waiting here beneath the hum of everyday noise. You walk slowly through the streets as evening drapes itself across the buildings. Neon signs begin to bloom like mechanical flowers, their colors reflected in puddles from last night's rain. You pause before one of those reflections and watch the world ripple beneath your feet. People pass behind you, unaware of how their shapes bend and dance in the water. For a moment, it feels as though you're standing between two realities, one above one, mirrored, both equally real, both fleeting. You make your way toward an old bridge that arches over the river, cutting through the city. The air smells faintly of iron and rain. Beneath the bridge, the water glows with the light of passing cars, shimmering with liquid fire. You lean against the railing and watch, remembering the mountain, the temple, the wind. Now the world moves faster, the current stronger, the reflections more chaotic. Yet you feel unshaken. The stillness you found on the mountain has followed you here, like a secret you no longer have to protect. A woman selling flowers stands near the bridge. Her hands are rough, her smile worn but unwavering. She hums to herself as she arranges her blossoms, small worlds of color amid the concrete. You buy a single lotus, its petals pale as dawn. She places it carefully in your hand and says, "It blooms best in the dirty water." Her voice is neither tired nor bitter, only certain. You nod, knowing the truth of her words. Beauty does not avoid suffering. It rises through it. You continue walking the lotus, cradled gently in your palm. The crowd thickens, a tide of anonymous faces, each carrying their invisible stories, joys, losses, silent wars. For the first time, you feel none of the usual distance. Every stranger feels like a variation of your own reflection. The line between you and them begins to soften, dissolve. The Buddha's teaching echoes quietly within, seeing oneself in all beings and all beings in oneself. A child runs past, laughing, chasing a paper kite that flutters like a heartbeat against the sky. You stop to watch as the kite dips and dives between buildings, barely escaping collision. Yet it never falls. You think of your own life, how many times you've nearly crashed, only to find yourself caught again by invisible strings of grace. The wind does not promise safety, but it always offers direction. You find a small tea shop tucked between two narrow alleys. Its door is half open, and the smell of jasmine drifts through the air. Inside, old wooden tables gleam with the memory of countless evenings. You sit near the window and place the lotus in a small bowl of water, The shopkeeper, an elderly man with eyes like calm rivers, pours you a cup of tea without asking what you want. "You look like someone who's learning to listen," he says. You smile, unsure how to reply. The tea is warm, fragrant, the kind that doesn't hurry the drinker. You take a sip, and in that instant, the entire city seems to exhale. Outside, rain begins again, soft but persistent, tapping the window with a rhythm too delicate to disturb. Each drop leaves a trail, slides downward, merges with another, disappears. The glass becomes a living scroll of impermanence. The shopkeeper wipes a table nearby and speaks again, almost to himself. "The city is a mirror," he says. "It shows you what still clings." You look out the window and understand. Every noise, every movement, every irritation reflects the remnants of attachment still hidden within you. If something disturbs you, it's not the city. It's the part of you still asking the world to behave differently. Acceptance, then, is the cleanest mirror of all. You leave a coin on the counter and step back into the rain. The streets shine under the dim lights, each puddle a small mirror, catching fragments of sky. The lotus in your hand has opened slightly, its petals glistening with raindrops. You walk slowly, noticing how every reflection seems to multiply. Windows, mirrors, puddles, eyes. The world has become a hall of mirrors, and each one whispers the same thing: "I am you." The rain thickens, and soon you are soaked, but you don't rush. You let the water find its way down your face, feeling each drop as a baptism of now. The crowd hurries past umbrellas, tilted shoes splashing, but you move differently in rhythm, with something older than time. A bus passes spraying water from the road, and for a heartbeat, the world blurs completely. When the blur clears, the streetlight ahead glows like a small sun through mist. You stop beneath it. The light hums quietly, encased in glass, haloed by rain. Around it, moths circle tireless in their devotion. You think of the moth from that first night by the candle, its fragile yearning, its unknowing wisdom. Now, seeing these moths, you understand their dance differently. They are not drawn to die. They are drawn to merge, to become one with what they love. You smile, realizing that all longing at its core is the soul's instinct to return to light. The rain begins to ease. You take one last look at the lotus in your hand. Its petals are fully open now, holding tiny pools of water at their center. You lift it slightly, letting the rain wash it clean, and place it gently into the river that runs beneath the bridge. The current accepts it without hesitation, carrying it downstream, a quiet offering, a moving prayer. As you watch it drift away, the reflections of streetlights follow it like a procession of stars. The city hums, the river moves, the night deepens, and within you a silence as vast as the mountain begins to bloom. You realize that home isn't a place or a temple or a landscape. Home is this seeing, this letting go, this luminous, ordinary moment where everything mirrors everything else. You turn to leave, and in the wet glass of a nearby shop window, your reflection smiles back, not as an image, but as understanding itself. You arrive home near midnight. The city has quieted, its pulse slowed to a hum beneath the rain-soaked streets. The key slides into the lock with a sound that feels older than habit. When you open the door, the air inside greets you with its familiar scent. Wood tea, a trace of dust and memory. Everything looks the same, yet nothing feels identical. The furniture, the books, the walls, all seem slightly more alive, as if they too have been watching you learn to see. You hang your coat by the door and stand in the center of the room, listening. The silence here is different from the silence of the mountain or temple. It has texture, the weight of lived days of laughter, once folded into the corners of old arguments turned to dust. You realize that even silence remembers. It holds everything patiently until you are ready to listen again. The lamp on the table flickers softly. You light it, and the warm glow spills across the floor. Shadows rise in gentle waves, curling around objects like affectionate ghosts. You walk through each room as if visiting a past self. The bed, the mirror, the empty cup on the windowsill all seem to whisper versions of you that once lingered here. You do not push them away. You let them speak. In the kitchen, you fill a glass of water and notice the reflection trembling with the pulse of your hand. You drink, and it feels like drinking from time itself, the taste of countless nights, just like this one, where you tried to find peace in small rituals. But tonight is different. You are no longer searching for stillness. You are letting stillness find you. A small clock ticks on the wall, steady as breath. The rhythm reminds you of walking through the valley of the wind between the prayer flags of the shepherd's words on the mountain. You sit by the window and open it slightly. The night enters without hesitation. A soft breeze flows in, carrying the scent of wet earth and faint jasmine. You watch as the curtains sway slowly, rhythmically, like a monk bowing in devotion. Your gaze drifts to the street below. A cat moves through the shadows, precise and quiet. Somewhere a door closes. Somewhere else a light flicks off. You think about all the unseen lives unfolding simultaneously within this small stretch of city, the private universes, the tender hopes, the ordinary griefs. Each person you realize is a room in the great house of existence, and this house, this life, has no single name. It is too vast, too intertwined to belong to anyone alone. You take a notebook from the shelf, its pages yellowed and soft. When you open it, you find words written years ago, questions, fragments of dreams, half-finished poems. The handwriting feels familiar, but distant, like meeting someone you once loved and now regard with quiet affection. You read one line that makes you pause. "One day I will return to myself." You smile. The line no longer feels like longing, it feels like completion. You close the notebook and sit quietly, your hands resting on its cover. The lamp's light begins to dim. Outside, the clouds part just enough for the moon to appear a pale witness, unbothered by distance. Its light falls across the room, turning everything silver and soft. You remember the mountain's summit, how the moon seemed close enough to touch. Now it hangs, just as near, reminding you that nearness has never depended on space. A memory surfaces uninvited but kind. You're a child again, building a small house from stones and sticks near a river. You worked carefully, arranging each piece with reverence. When the tide came, it carried the house away, and you cried not for the loss, but because you didn't yet understand impermanence. Now, sitting here, you whisper a quiet thank you to that child. The tide had been teaching you all along. You walk to the mirror and look at your reflection. The face staring back is not younger or older, it is simply truer. The eyes hold light that does not belong to time. You raise your hand and the reflection follows. But this time, the boundary feels porous, like water meeting water. You remember the river in the city, the way reflections trembled without breaking. You whisper to your reflection, "I see you." And in the glass, something deeper than your face seems to nod. The lamp flickers once more, then steadies. You sit on the floor, legs crossed, spine relaxed. The breath moves in, out quiet, precise. You begin to feel the house breathing with you. the wood expanding slightly. With each exhale, the walls settling into stillness. Even the air feels rhythmic, as if the whole structure has joined you in meditation. The separation between inside and outside softens until you cannot tell where one begins and the other ends. You stay like that for a long time, perhaps an hour, perhaps a lifetime. Thought dissolves into sensation. Sensation dissolves into silence. There is only awareness, vast, tender, infinite. Within that awareness, everything is forgiven. The past becomes a soft echo, the future a breath not yet taken. You realize that forgiveness was never about others. It was about remembering that nothing ever truly departed. When you finally open your eyes, dawn is pressing at the edges of the curtains. The first light slips into the room, illuminating the floating dust like small galaxies in motion. You stand, stretch, and smile at the simplicity of it all. You have climbed mountains, crossed rivers, walked through rain and silence, only to arrive here in this ordinary room that has been waiting all along. You open the window wide. The city begins to stir, distant footsteps, clinking cups, a sparrow's single note. You feel no rush to join or withdraw. You are part of it effortlessly. The house hums faintly alive, content. You whisper into the morning air, "I am home." The wind enters in reply, lifting the edge of the curtain, touching your face like a hand that remembers. And somewhere deep within the quiet, the house exhales, as if it too understands. The morning unfurls with a gentleness that feels almost shy. Light spills through the window in strands, weaving gold across the floorboards. The house hums faintly, like it remembers the rhythm of your breath from the night before. You sit at the table with a cup of tea cooling beside you, watching steam rise and vanish. The world seems to begin in that small wisp of vapor, born dissolving, born again. Outside, the city is stirring, not in a rush, but in soft fragments. The clink of dishes from the apartment next door, the squeak of a bicycle passing over wet pavement, the faint chime of a temple bell carried by the wind. That bell is distant, barely audible, yet it pierces the heart like a memory you didn't know you had. You close your eyes and listen. It rings, once, then fades. For a moment, time holds its breath. You realize that the bell doesn't just sound, it calls. It calls you inward toward something wordless, ancient, untouched by circumstance. The Buddha once said that awakening is not the discovery of something new, it's the remembering of what has always been true. The bell is that reminder. Its echo is the soul answering itself. You finish your tea and step outside. The air is clear, washed clean by last night's rain. Puddles mirror the sky and clouds drift lazily in both directions above and below your feet. You walk slowly, letting the rhythm of your steps align with the faint echo of the bell still lingering in your mind. The streets are quieter than usual. You take a turn down an alley, lined with old walls cracked and layered with graffiti. Amidst the color and decay, a small vine has found a home, crawling through the cracks, blooming tiny white flowers. You pause, smiling. Life insists. Even in neglect, it finds its doorway. You whisper to yourself, so does the heart. As you walk farther, the sound of the bell returns clearer, this time closer. You follow it, not as pursuit, but as companionship. The sound leads you to a small temple, hidden between two tall buildings. Its roof is old copper green with age, and the entrance flanked by stone lions whose faces have softened under decades of rain. Inside, a single monk is sweeping the courtyard. His movements are slow, deliberate, like a dance between dust and stillness. You stand quietly, not wanting to intrude. When he finishes, he looks up, smiles, and gestures for you to come in. You bow lightly before stepping into the main hall. The interior is dim but warm. The air smells of sandalwood and ash. A large bell hangs from the ceiling, its surface dark with fingerprints and years of touch. You approach it with reverence. The monk hands you a wooden mallet, his eyes kind. "Would you like to hear it speak?" he asks softly. You hesitate, then nod. You raise the mallet and tap the bell gently. The sound blooms instantly deep and resonant, spreading through the hall like ripples in a vast invisible ocean. It's not a sound you hear so much as one you become. The vibration moves through your chest, your spine, your breath. It fills you, empties you, returns you to something that has no name. When the sound fades, you stand there for a long time. The silence that follows feels even louder, pulsing with presence. The monk nods again, as if reading your thoughts. "The bell doesn't end," he says. "It only changes form. The sound continues here." He touches his chest. You smile, gratitude rising unspoken. Before you leave, the monk adds, "Every sound is a reminder. The world itself is one great bell. If you listen deeply, you will hear even sorrow ring with truth." You step back outside. The city seems to shimmer differently now. You can still feel the vibration of the bell, humming beneath everything, in the wind, brushing your skin, in the footsteps of strangers, in the beating of your own heart. Every sound, every silence carries that same resonance. You are here, you are alive, you are already enough. You walk until you reach the river. The water glides beneath the bridge, patient, luminous. You drop a pebble into it. The circles expand outward, merging, disappearing, echoing. Each ripple seems to whisper the same question the monk's bell did. Can you hear what never stops? The wind picks up, carrying the faint scent of incense from somewhere unseen. You close your eyes, and the whole city becomes a temple. The hum of cars, a chant, the rustling of trees, a hymn, even the distant cry of a vendor transformed into prayer. You realize that the sacred was never hidden. It was only waiting for you to listen differently. A child nearby throws a stick into the river and claps as it floats away. His laughter rings clear, sharp, innocent, perfect. You find yourself laughing too quietly, not because of amusement, but because of recognition. The bell, the wind, the laughter. All of it is the same sound returning through different mouths. You stay by the river until the sun begins to lower, gilding the water in molten gold. The bell's echo has long faded, but its presence lingers softer now, like breath beneath your ribs. You whisper a thank you to the monk, to the bell, to everything that has ever taught you to listen. As you turn to leave, a breeze passes, touching your face with the gentleness of memory. Somewhere behind you, another bell rings faint, then fainter, until it blends completely with silence. You smile, knowing that silence isn't the absence of sound. It is the sound of everything remembering itself. By the time you leave the river, the day has ripened into the soft heat of afternoon. The streets are more alive now, voices overlapping, vendors calling out prices, footsteps weaving through a tapestry of noise. You wander through a narrow street that opens into a marketplace. The air here hums with the pulse of countless lives, laughter, bargaining, the soft rhythm of existence turning itself endlessly. The first stall you pass sells spices, piles of color so bright they seem to hum turmeric like sunlight, crushed to dust, chilly red, as intention, saffron gold, as a whispered blessing. The merchant grinds something in a mortar, and the air fills with scent, so potent it feels alive. You close your eyes and inhale deeply. In that breath, you can taste entire landscapes, deserts, oceans, hands that worked the soil. You realize that even fragrance carries memory, the trace of everything it has touched. Across from the spice stall, a woman sells old books. Their pages are yellowed, their spines cracked, their titles fading like half-remembered dreams. You pick one up. The paper smells faintly of rain and time. Inside, a pressed leaf hides between two pages. You lift it gently, wondering whose hands placed it there, what moment they were trying to keep from vanishing. You close the book and think we are all like that leaf, carried, preserved, fragile, yet somehow surviving the weight of years. As you move deeper into the market, every stall becomes a reflection of life's impermanence and persistence. A potter shapes wet clay with steady hands. His fingers leave ridges that look like tiny rivers. You watch the form emerge, fragile but certain. The clay remembers every touch he says without looking up. His words strike something inside you. Maybe we too are vessels being shaped by unseen hands. Each experience a curve, a soft correction toward balance. You stop at a stall selling mirrors, dozens of them hung like small moons catching the afternoon light. Each one holds a different world, a child's face, a passing cloud, your own image flickering between strangers. You look at yourself briefly, but the reflection seems to change with every breath. You recall something you once read. The mirror does not hold the face. It releases it. You smile and step away. The crowd thickens, a river of movement. The noise should be overwhelming, but it isn't. Every sound seems to weave into an invisible pattern, like threads forming a mandala. A vendor's song fades into the clang of metal, into laughter, into footsteps. It's all one fabric disorder only from the surface. Beneath it, a quiet intelligence moves everything toward harmony. You think of the bell from the morning, how its vibration continued long after sound ceased. Perhaps this too is the bell ringing through the marketplace in the voices of ordinary life. An old man sits at the corner playing a bamboo flute. The melody is simple, repetitive, circular, like breath itself. Children gather around him, swaying unconsciously. The notes rise and fall like gentle waves, and you feel your pulse slow to meet their rhythm. You drop a small coin into his bowl, and he nods, eyes bright. "The song is older than me," he says. "It travels through whoever listens." His words drift like music themselves. You realize that everything alive is an instrument of something larger. We only have to stay open to let the song pass through. You walk on, following the smell of baked bread. A woman pulls loaves from a clay oven, their crusts cracking with soft sighs. She breaks one and hands it to you before you can pay. "Eat," she says. The bread doesn't wait for hunger. You tear a piece and taste it, warm, smoky, perfect. The flavor spreads through you like memory. You thank her, and she waves her hand dismissively. Bread only lives if it's shared. Her words echo like a teaching. Near the end of the market, a stall sells small handmade lanterns. The glass is tinted in shades of amber and blue. You buy one, its frame still warm from the maker's hands. When the merchant wraps it for you, he says quietly, "Light doesn't belong to the lantern." You look up, meeting his eyes. He smiles. It only passes through. You walk out of the market carrying the lantern unlit, but glowing faintly in the sun. The noise fades behind you until it becomes memory. The air grows quieter, the rhythm of your steps returning. You realize that every encounter today, every sound, every face, every scent has been another reflection of the same truth. Life is endlessly giving itself away. Nothing holds. Everything offers. You stop by a small fountain at the edge of the square. Children are playing nearby, splashing water that catches the light and shatters it into rainbows. You set the lantern down beside you and watch as the ripples distort the reflections of the sky. The sun dips lower, and the water glows orange, then crimson, then gold. You understand now that the market wasn't chaos. It was a moving meditation, the universe practicing generosity through motion and noise. As dusk gathers, you light the lantern. Its flame burns small but steady, the glass coloring it in hues of amber and blue. You carry it with both hands, careful, reverent. The light moves across your face, flickering softly. You think of the potter's clay, the flute's melody, the bread's warmth, all forms of the same illumination, briefly shaped, briefly shared. You reach the river again, just as the first stars appear. You place the lantern on the water and let it drift. It moves gently with the current, its reflection trembling below it. Two flames, one above one beneath, inseparable. You whisper a wish that isn't a wish. May I continue to see the sacred in the ordinary. The lantern drifts farther, its glow merging with the lights of the city until you can no longer tell them apart. You stand there until darkness settles fully, and the sound of the flute, faint but persistent, reaches you again through the night air. You realize it's the same song, the song that travels through whoever listens. You close your eyes, letting it move through you, and for the first time you feel it completely. The bell, the breath, the river, the city, all singing the same wordless song. The next morning rises like a slow confession. The city still sleeps under its silver veil of mist, and the air holds that tender quiet between endings and beginnings. You walk through streets half lit by dawn, carrying nothing but your breath. The scent of last night's rain lingers, petrichor mingled with the faint perfume of blooming jasmine climbing a cracked wall. Everything feels familiar, yet slightly transformed, as if the world has been rearranged in your absence. You find yourself walking toward the outskirts again, though no destination calls. The streets narrow, then open into a long road lined with old tamarind trees. Their branches stretch over the path like hands cupping light. Dew drips from their leaves, and the sound is so delicate it could be mistaken for time itself passing. You step carefully, and each step seems to awaken something beneath your soles, a memory perhaps, or a forgotten rhythm of belonging. As you walk, you begin to notice how the morning light touches everything equally. The broken bottle on the roadside, the wildflowers blooming stubbornly through cracks, the face of an old man sweeping dust from his doorstep. The light does not choose, it simply arrives. And you realize maybe enlightenment isn't about rising above the world. Maybe it's about loving it with such fullness that nothing is beneath your compassion. A small cart rolls by its wheels, creaking like an old melody. The vendor smiles at you, a simple, effortless gesture, and offers a piece of fruit. You take it without speaking. It's a mango, warm from the sun. When you bite into it, the taste explodes with sweetness and memory of summers long gone, of laughter without purpose. For a moment, the fruit feels like an entire season living inside your mouth. You thank him silently, and he nods as if he's heard. Further along the road bends toward a field. Mist still clings low over the grass, curling like breath over cool water. In the middle stands a scarecrow, its tattered clothes fluttering in the wind. You stop watching it bow again and again, as though greeting the world it's meant to guard. It reminds you of the human heart, fragile, hollow, yet always standing against the wind. You bow back, a quiet recognition between two keepers of emptiness. A dog follows you for a while, trotting with easy curiosity. You say nothing, and neither does it. Together you walk in rhythm, your shadows moving side by side. When you reach the next crossroads, the dog pauses, looks up, and turns down another path. You watch it disappear into the trees, feeling no sadness. Some companions, you realize, are meant only for a few steps. Their leaving does not diminish the journey. It completes it. You reach a hill where the road begins to rise gently toward the horizon. The sun has climbed higher now, its warmth unfurling like a hand opening over the earth. You stop halfway and sit on a rock by the roadside. From here, you can see everything: the sleeping city below the river, glinting like a thread of glass, the market roofs flashing with bits of color. For the first time, you see how it all connects, not in a straight line, but in an intricate weave of moments, a web of encounters, teachings, breaths. You take a deep breath and close your eyes. The sounds gather: birds stitching the air with song wind, folding through grass, the faint murmur of distant bells. Every sound carries the same essence: impermanence turned into music. You realize that listening has become your prayer and silence your temple. After a while, you stand and continue walking. The road begins to descend, now winding toward the ocean you had nearly forgotten. You follow it, each step lighter than the last, until the air shifts the scent of salt and open water, announcing its presence long before the horizon does. The first glimpse of the sea steals your breath. It stretches endlessly, neither beginning nor end, mirroring the sky in perfect humility. You walk down to the shore. The sand is cool beneath your feet, the waves rolling in slow, deliberate arcs. Each one breaks, retreats, returns, the eternal heartbeat of the planet. You stand there, letting the water reach your ankles, your knees, your skin. The sound of the sea fills you completely, its rhythm aligning with your own pulse. The wind off the water is strong, but not harsh. It smells of distance, of places unseen yet somehow remembered. You pick up a small shell, its spiral intricate and ancient. Holding it to your ear, you hear the ocean inside, that endless whispering, that sacred hum of everything becoming everything else. You think of the monk's words: the bell never ends. It only changes form. The ocean, too, is a bell, vast, unceasing, calling you home. You walk along the shore, watching waves erase your footprints seconds after you make them. The lesson is simple, gentle, complete. You are not meant to leave marks that last forever. You are meant to move through the world like water, shaping gently, touching deeply, and then returning to stillness. A fisherman stands waist deep in the surf, casting his net with practiced grace. His motions are a kind of meditation, his patience effortless. You watch the net arc glint and vanish beneath the water. When he pulls it back, it shines with silver, small lives shimmering in morning light. He smiles, his face soft with gratitude. You bow inwardly. Here, even labor becomes prayer. The tide begins to rise. You wade farther in until the water brushes your waist, then your chest. You close your eyes and let the waves hold you, lift you, release you. For a moment you float, neither anchored nor lost. The water carries you, as it carries everything. You feel your heart expand until it matches the horizon. When you finally stand again, the world looks simpler. The sea, the sky, the sand, nothing needs to be explained. You whisper a single thought: I am carried. The wind answers by moving softly across the surface of the waves. You walk back toward the road as the sun climbs higher, drying your clothes, warming your skin. Behind you, the sea continues its chant, steady and endless. Ahead, the path stretches in a shimmer of light, leading you not away, but back into the world, back into its beautiful impermanence. You smile as you step forward, knowing this: You are not returning from enlightenment. You are bringing it with you. Every street, every face, every breath that awaits will be a continuation of this same stillness, this same song. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the sea keeps breathing for you. By the time you return to the city, clouds have begun to gather again. The wind has changed, not cold, but curious, as if carrying questions it wants the earth to answer. The light has softened into a silver gray that makes every reflection sharper. You find yourself walking toward the oldest part of town, where narrow streets wind like veins around forgotten courtyards. The air smells of paper, wet stone, and time. You turn a corner and find a small building with faded letters carved above the door, House of Quiet Words. The door stands open. Inside, dust floats in lazy spirals through beams of half-light. You step in. The floor creaks beneath your feet like an old violin string. Rows of books stretch into the dimness, tall and uneven. Their spines gleam like worn leather faces, each one waiting to tell a story that perhaps no one remembers. You touch one gently, the way you might greet an elder, and the faint scent of rain rises from the pages. A librarian appears silent and slow-moving, her gray hair tied with a strip of red thread. She smiles, not surprised to see you. "Welcome," she says. "You've come during good weather for reading." You look outside, the first drops are falling soft and deliberate. They land on the window pane, leaving small circles that merge and vanish. It always rains when the books grow restless. She adds, her eyes glimmering with quiet humor. You follow her gesture to a table near the back where a single candle burns. She motions for you to sit. You choose a book at random. Its cover is plain, its title faded almost to invisibility. When you open it, the pages whisper. The first line reads, "Every life is a library, and each breath writes a page." You smile, feeling that familiar tightening in your chest, the recognition of something you've always known, but never said aloud. Outside, the rain begins to deepen. The sound on the roof turns rhythmic, meditative, like thousands of soft hands keeping time. You read a few lines, then stop, letting the sound fill the spaces between sentences. Each drop feels like punctuation in a story larger than the one before you. The librarian returns with 2 cups of tea. "These books prefer company," she says, setting one before you. "Sometimes they read us instead." You laugh quietly, but she doesn't. She simply nods toward the shelves. Listen long enough and you'll hear the words turning. You close the book and sit still, eyes half shut. At first, there's only the rain, steady and sure. Then very faintly, you begin to hear something else, a low murmur, like hundreds of voices whispering underwater. The sound doesn't frighten you. It comforts. It feels like memory speaking back. You realize that each book is breathing the stories it holds, not as words, but as vibrations, the same way the bell carried sound beyond its echo. You think of how every human life, too, hums with its own unspoken story, the kind written not in ink, but in the pauses between choices. You wonder if someone listened deeply enough, could they hear all our souls reading themselves aloud? The librarian breaks your thought. "Do you know why it's called the Library of Rain?" she asks. You shake your head. "Because rain has read every story ever told," she says. "It has touched every page, fallen on every name, washed over every grave. It remembers." She takes a sip of tea. When rain falls, it isn't the sky crying, it's the universe recalling what it once loved. Her words stay with you as you sit there watching droplets slide down the glass. Each one carries a small reflection of the world outside, a passerby, a roof, a bird. then dissolves into the next. You realize you're watching impermanence write poetry. You open the book again. This time the words feel different. Nothing you love is ever lost. It becomes part of the rain that will one day touch you again. You exhale slowly. Perhaps this is what forgiveness really is, recognizing the return of what was never truly gone. The librarian begins humming a tune low and ancient. The sound mingles with the rain until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You close the book, your hands warm against its cover, and whisper, "Thank you." She smiles as if hearing every gratitude ever offered in that room. You stand bowing slightly, and she nods toward the door. "Keep the sound," she says. Words fade, but sound remembers. You step back into the world, and the rain welcomes you like an old friend. The city glistens. Streets turn to rivers of reflection walls, shimmering as though painted with memory. You walk slowly, the sound of rain surrounding you over rooftops, down alleys, along gutters, an orchestra of impermanence. Each drop feels like a page turning, each ripple like a verse returning to its source. You think of all the places this rain has been: mountains, oceans, temples, the breath of strangers, and you realize you are walking inside the memory of everything. A young boy passes you holding a paper boat. He sets it on the puddled street and watches it float, laughing softly as it drifts toward the drain. You watch with him. The tiny boat swirls, then disappears into the current. "It's going to the sea," he says proudly. You nod. Yes, it knows the way. When he runs off, you remain for a while standing in the soft rain. The city sounds distant, softened by water. You look up at the gray sky and whisper a single thought: "May I remember like the rain does." The wind shifts, carrying the faint chime of a bell from somewhere far away. The same bell perhaps still echoing through the world. The rain responds, falling harder for a moment like applause. You smile, lift your face to the sky, and let it wash through you, not as weather, but as blessing. You are not escaping the storm. You are becoming part of its rhythm, and for a brief, exquisite moment, it feels as though the entire universe is reading itself through your heartbeat. By dawn, the rain has stopped, leaving the city cleansed and glimmering like something newly born. Every rooftop drips with the last tears of the night, and the streets gleam with scattered light reflections stitched together by puddles that refuse to vanish. You step outside and breathe deeply. The air smells of beginnings. You walk without direction, guided only by the rhythm of your footsteps. The world feels quieter, not because there is less sound, but because your listening has deepened. You no longer chase meaning, you allow it to arrive. A sparrow lands near your feet, picks at something invisible, then takes off again, leaving a single feather behind. You pick it up, noticing how fragile and deliberate each strand is. Even something meant for flight must know the art of surrender. The road leads you to a narrow alley you don't remember ever seeing before. At its end stands a small shop, its wooden sign faded, its window filled with hundreds of clocks. Grand clocks, pocket watches, wristwatches, pendulums, each one ticking at its own rhythm, like hearts that have forgotten to synchronize. Above the door, barely legible, the words, "Time repairs." Here. You push the door open. A bell chimes softly overhead, and a warm scent of oil, brass, and cedar greets you. Inside, the sound of ticking is everywhere, hundreds of small heartbeats overlapping, creating a symphony of seconds. An old man sits behind the counter, magnifying lens perched over one eye, his hands moving with patient precision as he repairs a delicate watch. He doesn't look up when you enter, but his voice reaches you like a memory. Every clock keeps its own prayer, he says. You approach quietly. What kind of prayer, you ask? He smiles faintly, without pausing his work. The prayer of continuation, to keep moving even when unnoticed. He finishes adjusting a tiny gear and sets the watch down. Its tick resumes small, sure, unwavering. Most people think I fix clocks. He continues, finally looking at you. His eyes are gray, not dull, but vast. But really, I only remind them how to listen to their own rhythm. You look around. Some clocks have stopped frozen in silent defiance. Others keep perfect time. A few run slightly fast, impatient for something unnamed. The old man stands and winds one of the larger wall clocks. Each one carries a memory, he says. Moments trapped in metal and motion. Births, departures, first meetings, last breaths. His hands linger on the pendulum, then drop to his sides. Even when they stop, time doesn't. It just waits for us to catch up. You run your fingers along a nearby pocket, watch its case engraved with intricate spirals. Do you ever lose track of all these different times? He chuckles softly. I don't keep track. I keep company. His words settle in you like a slow echo. The ticking around you seems to grow softer, deeper, more human. You realize each clock marks a different kind of silence between beats, a pause that is not emptiness, but breath. The old man gestures to a chair. Sit. You look like someone whose inner clock has forgotten to rest. You sit, and he pours tea from a dented kettle into 2 chipped cups. Do you know, he asks, that every tick you hear is followed by a silence of equal length? We only notice the sound, but the silence is what allows it. He sets a cup before you. Time itself is half sound, half stillness. Life is the same. You sip the tea. It's bitter at first, then deepens into warmth. You glance at the clocks, their rhythms weaving together until they sound like rain remembered. Sometimes you say it feels like time is chasing me. He nods. It only chases those who run. Sit still long enough, and it will walk beside you again. A clock on the far wall begins to chime low, resonant like a heartbeat made of metal. The sound fills the shop, and everything seems to pause around it. When it ends, the old man looks at you and smiles. There, he says softly, did you feel it? That was time bowing to eternity. You don't speak. You simply sit, watching him work again, the way his fingers move gently but firmly, the way his breath aligns with each motion. There is something sacred about the precision, the patience. It feels less like fixing and more like devotion. Tell me, he says after a while, why do you think we measure time? You think, then answer. To know how much we have. He shakes his head, eyes glimmering. No, we measure it because we've forgotten it can't be owned. Time isn't something to spend, it's something to witness. You look around again, and suddenly every clock looks like a mirror, reflecting not seconds, but lives. Each tick feels like a reminder. Nothing lasts, but everything matters. When you finish your tea, the old man rises and walks to a shelf behind him. He returns holding a small pocket watch. Its surface is scratched, its hands missing. Here, he says, placing it gently in your palm. It doesn't tell time anymore. It reminds you that you don't have to either. You run your thumb over the worn metal. How much he smiles. You've already paid with your listening. You bow humbled and step back toward the door. As you leave the shop, bell chimes once more. Outside, the air feels different, as if the world itself has slowed enough for you to feel its pulse again. You walk through the streets, and every sound, footsteps, voices wind, seems measured by invisible hands. The feather in your pocket flutters slightly with each step, as though keeping time with your breath. You reach a small square where an old clock tower rises against the gray sky. Its hands point toward noon, but you realize the clock has stopped. You don't mind. For the first time, it feels right that it should. The silence between ticks has become enough. You sit at the base of the tower, close your eyes, and let the world move at its own pace. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls one slow note after another. But this time, it no longer calls you forward or back. It simply affirms you are here, perfectly placed in the center of forever. And for a brief, exquisite moment, you feel what the old clockmaker must have always known, that eternity is not an expanse of time, but the pause between one heartbeat and the next. By the time you awaken the next day, the air has the crisp stillness that comes after long contemplation. It feels as though even the world has taken a slow breath with you. Outside, the light is thin and tender, the kind that doesn't declare itself, but simply appears, like forgiveness. You decide to walk again, not to any destination, but because movement itself has become a form of listening. You cross familiar streets, passing the tea shop, the bell temple, the old market, now half awake. The scent of bread drifts through the alleys, mingling with incense and the faint trace of morning smoke. You smile at the quiet hum of ordinary life, the laughter of someone unseen, the bark of a dog echoing between walls, the uneven rhythm of a broom on wet pavement. All of it feels symphonic, perfectly uncomposed. You walk until the road leads you to the river again. That same river that has appeared and disappeared throughout your journey. The same one that remembers everything you've ever let go of. Today, it looks different, broader, slower, carrying reflections of the sky like folded silk. A new bridge arches over it, made of stone and iron, its surface glistening with dew. You step onto it. The bridge hums faintly under your feet, as though it too has a heartbeat. Below, the river moves with unhurried certainty, its surface breaking now and then, where fish rise to taste the light. You stop at the center and lean over the railing. Your reflection meets you, clear, calm, but subtly distorted by the movement of the water. It seems less like a mirror and more like a conversation between you and the flow. A memory surfaces, the fisherman from days ago, his quiet patience. You remember how his net glistened, how his waiting was prayer. Now, standing here, you feel that same stillness returning. The bridge becomes his net. The river becomes the silence between your thoughts. You are no longer waiting for anything, you are being held. A soft voice interrupts the quiet. Beautiful, isn't it? You turn to see an old woman leaning on the opposite railing. Her hair is white and wild, her clothes simple, her eyes alight with an ease you've come to recognize, the ease of someone who has stopped pretending to be separate from the world. It's always beautiful, you answer. She nods. Every day it changes, and every day it's still the same. She taps the railing lightly. The bridge helps us see that. One foot on each side, life and death, past and future self, and the rest of it. She laughs softly. Balance isn't standing still, it's learning to move with both sides. You smile, unsure whether she's speaking of the bridge or of life itself. She reaches into her bag and pulls out a small stone, perfectly smooth. I come here every morning, she says. I drop a stone for every day I've lived. One for joy, one for grief, one for gratitude. The river keeps them all, though it never holds them in one place. She hands you the stone. Would you like to offer one too? You take it. It's warm from her palm, solid and simple. You look down at the water, flowing endless, forgiving. You think of everything the journey has shown you: the mountain's breath, the wind's patience, the bell's echo, the marketplace's chaos, the rain's memory. You close your hand around the stone and whisper, "For everything that has carried me." You drop it gently into the river. The splash is small, but the ripples spread far, widening until they vanish into light. The woman smiles. "It always answers," she says. "You just have to listen long enough." The two of you stand there in silence, watching the water. A bird flies low across the surface, its reflection following an instant behind. The woman turns to leave, but pauses. "The river gives back in its own time," she says. "When you hear your own voice echoing from somewhere unexpected, that's how you'll know." She walks away, her steps as steady as a clock's second hand. You watch her disappear into the mist at the far end of the bridge. You stay a while longer, tracing the patterns on the water. The sound of the river becomes the only sound, soft, steady, full. You realize that it has been speaking all along in languages too vast for words. You place your hands on the railing and whisper, "I hear you." The wind answers by rising gently, brushing against your face. It carries with it a faint sound, perhaps memory, perhaps imagination, the echo of the very bell you once struck at the temple. The tone is distant, but pure, like a circle finally closing. A thought surfaces gentle as the tide. Every echo is love returning to its source. You walk to the other side of the bridge. The air feels lighter, clearer, as though crossing has untied something within you. The river glides beneath, unconcerned with what it has carried or released. You realize now that the bridge is not simply a crossing. It is a mirror of consciousness itself. Each time you walk it, you travel between who you were and who you are becoming, and each crossing leaves you more transparent to light. On the far bank, an old willow bends over the water. You walk. By the following evening, the city feels lighter, as though someone has lifted its weight without touching it. The air is calm, washed clean of all ambition. You walk through a district of narrow bridges, each one crossing over quiet canals, where the reflections of lanterns tremble like breathing constellations. The sky above is deep violet, the kind of color that only appears when day is too tired to argue with night. You walk until you reach a bridge you've never seen before, wooden, curved, almost fragile. Its handrails are carved with faint patterns of waves and wings. There's a stillness about it that makes you hesitate, as if crossing it might change something you can't name. You step forward anyway. Halfway across, you stop and lean on the railing. The water below mirrors the sky perfectly, so perfectly that you can't tell which side of the world you stand on. Ripples spread where a leaf falls, bending the reflected stars into trembling circles. You wonder if the heavens above are merely reflections of the ones below, if the divine and the ordinary have always been each other's mirrors, endlessly trading places. Then you hear them faint, distant, almost not sound at all. Wings. At first you think it's just wind, but the rhythm deepens, multiplies. The air thickens with the invisible pulse of flight. You look up expecting to see birds crossing the twilight, but the sky is empty. Still, the sound remains, hundreds of wings cutting through silence, unseeable, yet undeniably there. You close your eyes and listen. The rush of air moves through you, vibrating somewhere beneath your ribs. It feels like memory and prophecy, at once the echo of something that has always accompanied you unnoticed. You realize the birds were never in the sky. They have always been flying through the vastness within you. A voice, gentle, unhurried, seems to rise from nowhere and everywhere. Everything that moves through you leaves its wings behind. You open your eyes. No one stands nearby, but the words linger in the air as tangible as breath. You look again at the water, and for a fleeting moment, you see movement shadows darting beneath the surface, swift and luminous, like spirits remembering their bodies. Then they vanish, leaving only ripples. You rest your hands on the railing. The wood is smooth and warm, as if it remembers every traveler who has ever paused here. You think of all the bridges in your life, the ones you crossed, the ones you burned, the ones you built too late. Each in its own way brought you here. Perhaps forgiveness too is a kind of bridge the moment you stop demanding that the past undo itself. The invisible wings move again, softer, now slower, as if circling above you in blessing. The wind changes direction, brushing against your face. You take a deep breath, and it feels like inhaling flight. You remember the clockmaker's words. Time isn't something to spend, it's something to witness. Perhaps flight too is not escape, but witnessing the sky, learning itself through motion. A woman appears at the other end of the bridge carrying a lantern. Her face is kind but unreadable, her steps careful. As she passes, she nods toward you. "They always come here at dusk," she says. "Who, you ask?" She smiles. "The birds that forgot they were ever birds." Then she crosses to the far side and disappears into the mist. You stay a while longer. The world grows quieter until even your thoughts seem to land softly and fold their wings. You lean over the railing again, watching the lantern lights reflect in the water. Each one trembles as if breathing birth and death contained in every flicker. You take the feather from your pocket, the one the sparrow left for you that morning. It glows faintly in the dying light, almost silver. You hold it over the water, then let it fall. It drifts gently, landing without sound, spinning once before becoming part of the reflection. The sound of wings returns louder, now filling the sky with invisible movement. You look up, and though you still can't see them, you feel their presence so vividly that it pulls tears to your eyes. You whisper into the air, "I remember." And in that instant, you understand you have never lost anything. Every moment you thought had vanished. Every love, every sorrow, every silence has only changed form. It all continues to fly somewhere within you, unseen but eternal. A breeze moves across the bridge, lifting your hair, brushing against your cheek like a tender farewell. Then, just as suddenly, it's gone. The air falls still again. The only sound is the quiet breathing of the water below, reflecting a sky that seems closer than ever. You stand there until the last of the light drains from the horizon. The city's lanterns flicker on one by one until their reflections blur into a golden trail leading away across the water. You follow that trail with your eyes, feeling your heart open, not as a wound, but as a sky without edges. When you finally turn to leave, you do not look back. You know now that everything you've ever loved, every whisper, every prayer, every bird that once flew through your dreams has never left. They are still crossing the invisible bridge, returning, always returning. And as you walk away, the faint sound of wings follows not behind, but within, steady, infinite, unending. Night descends quietly, like a thought returning home. The streets narrow and twist into silence, until even the sound of your footsteps begins to fade. The air is heavy with the scent of wet stone and wood smoke. Lanterns flicker against the walls, each one trembling in its own rhythm, each one a small confession of light. You walk slowly, following no road in particular, until the city opens again, and before you stands a house you do not remember ever seeing. It is old, but not abandoned. Its walls breathe, its windows shimmer faintly with life. There is something familiar about it, as though it has been waiting for you since before you knew what waiting meant. You hesitate, then step forward. The door opens without touch, sighing like an exhale. Inside, a single candle burns on a table. Shadows stretch long across the floor, meeting at the center like threads of memory converging on the same truth. You step inside. The air feels dense like being underwater. Dust glitters in the candlelight, and the faint smell of rain lingers in the wood. On the wall hang portraits, faces you half recognize. Some look like people you once knew. Others resemble versions of yourself you've tried to forget. Their eyes seem alive, not haunting, but observing, as if they are here to listen rather than to judge. A voice, low, gentle, drifts from the far end of the room. You've come to meet what you left behind. You turn. An old woman stands in the doorway, her face lined with kindness. She carries a lantern that glows softly, illuminating the path between you. Her eyes are mirrors of still water, calm, endless, forgiving. Whose house is this, you ask? She smiles faintly. Yours. But you've been renting it out to ghosts. She gestures for you to follow. The corridor ahead is long, lined with doors. Every room holds something you've forgotten to love, she says. You open the first door. Inside is the echo of a younger you, angry, restless, desperate for meaning. The younger you looks up, startled, but unafraid. You want to turn away, but the old woman shakes her head. Don't close it. Stay until it softens. So you sit, across from yourself. The silence is sharp at first, then tender. You watch as the younger you begins to dissolve, not disappear, but melt into the air like incense smoke. When you stand again, the room feels lighter. The second door opens to a room filled with laughter, your parents', your friends' voices, from lives that no longer overlap. The laughter is warm but bittersweet, echoing through the space like light bouncing off mirrors. You realize it isn't asking you to return. It's asking to be remembered without ache. You bow your head and whisper, "Thank you for teaching me joy, even when I didn't understand it." The next door creaks open before you can touch it. Inside is darkness, thick and almost tangible. It feels like all the nights you could not forgive yourself. You want to retreat, but the old woman places a hand on your shoulder. "Step in," she says. "The dark isn't against you. It's what carries your light." You step in. For a long moment you see nothing. Then slowly, your eyes adjust. Within the dark, faint glimmers move memories, fears, moments of shame, all flickering like dying stars. You kneel and touch the ground, and the darkness shifts beneath your fingers, not cold, not cruel, just vast. "You've mistaken me for punishment," it seems to whisper, "but I am rest." When you emerge, the old woman nods approvingly. "You've seen enough to stay," she says. "Now come upstairs." You follow her to a staircase winding like a spiral of breath. At the top is a single room bathed in moonlight. The windows are open, and the air hums with night sounds. Crickets wind distant waves. In the center stands a mirror, tall and narrow, its surface alive with silver light. "This is where you meet what watches," she says. "Not your reflection, your awareness." You step closer. The mirror shimmers, but does not show your face. Instead, you see scenes moving across its surface, the mountain breathing beneath dawn, the river holding its reflections, the city of mirrors, the market's color, the temple's wind. Each one arises and dissolves like thought. You realize you are watching your own journey, but without you at the center. Only life endlessly aware of itself. The old woman speaks softly. "You have been many things, seeker listener, wanderer witness. But beneath them all, you have always been what sees. You look at her, and you. She smiles. I am what remains when you stop dividing the light. Her lantern flickers, and for a moment her body becomes translucent. You glimpse through her stars' water dawn. Will I see you again, you ask? Her voice is both near and far. Every time you remember to see clearly, I will be the one seeing. Then she fades like smoke leaving a candle. The room fills with soft brightness, not from the lamp, not from the moon, but from everywhere. You stand before the mirror once more. This time your reflection appears not as one face, but as countless: the child, the wanderer, the monk, the mother, the friend, the stranger. All of them overlapping, transparent, infinite. You watch until all forms blur into pure light, until even that light begins to breathe. And in that breath, you understand light and shadow were never opposites. They are the same pulse moving through different hearts of the same truth. The house, the woman, the mirrors all dissolve into the rhythm of your own inhale, your own exhale. You open your eyes. The house is gone. You stand once more beneath the night sky, the moon high, the city asleep. The air is cool and still. A single candle flickers beside you on the cobblestone, your candle. You pick it up, and its light warms your hand. Somewhere nearby, a door closes softly, or perhaps it's the sound of your own heart settling into peace. You whisper into the quiet, I am both the shadow and the flame. And from the darkness, something replies, not in words, but in the trembling light itself. By dawn, the city feels distant behind you, as though it has retreated into its own dream. The air grows lighter, wider, the kind of air that no longer holds noise but listens. You follow a dirt path leading out toward the countryside, and with every step, something inside you loosens the weight of names, of clocks, of meanings you once believed were yours to carry. The road bends through fields of wild grass swaying in early light. Dew clings to the blades like strings of silver beads, and each drop holds a trembling reflection of the newborn sun. In the distance, you hear the faint ringing of a bell from some unseen monastery, each note soft as breath. The rhythm of it aligns with your steps, then with your pulse, until there's no separation between movement and music. You walk until the path ends in a wide field. Here, silence is not the absence of sound. It is its own vast presence rising and falling like the tide. You sit down among the tall grass, and the world seems to open around you, like an endless, invisible flower. There is no city, no house, no bridge, no river. Only this wind brushing across your skin, insects weaving small songs through the stems, light moving like a thought that never needs to speak. For a while you do nothing but breathe. You feel the earth beneath you solid yet alive, vibrating with a heartbeat older than memory. Each inhalation feels like borrowing, each exhalation like returning. The mind begins to dissolve its borders, softening like mist in the morning sun. You realize that what you call you is just another ripple on this field's infinite surface. In the distance, a figure appears, or perhaps it's just the shimmer of heat. As it comes closer, you see it's an old man carrying a bundle of reeds. His clothes are simple, his steps deliberate. When he reaches you, he sets the reeds down and smiles. I make flutes from these, he says. They used to be grass, and before that wind. You ask if he plays them. He nods, his eyes glinting with quiet joy. No one truly plays the flute, he says. We only let the wind remember its own song. He sits beside you, selects one reed, and begins to carve. The sound of his knife scraping wood is rhythmic, hypnotic. When he's done, He lifts the flute to his lips and blows gently. At first, the sound is fragile, a single trembling note. Then slowly it widens into a melody that feels both familiar and new. The field listens. The wind moves. Birds fall silent. The music is not beautiful in the way human songs are. It is more like truth given sound. Every note seems to open a hidden door in your chest. You close your eyes and images flow: the river, the mountain, the clockmaker's hands, the invisible birds, the house of shadows, all of them returning, blending, dissolving. The old man lowers the flute. The sound doesn't end, he says. It only changes where it lives. He places the flute into your hands. Now breathe through it. You hesitate, then raise it to your lips. The first breath is clumsy, uncertain. The second steadies. The third transforms. What emerges isn't music, it's a pulse, a resonance, a long exhale that belongs equally to you and to the world. The air vibrates through the reed, through your chest, through the soil. For a moment, you feel the field breathing with you, countless blades of grass swaying in synchrony, as though the earth itself is joining your song. You stop playing, and the silence that follows is immense, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels alive. The old man nods, pleased. That's it, he says. That's the sound of what doesn't need to be said. You look around. The wind has picked up again, carrying seeds into the sky. They spin and drift like tiny stars. Each one glows briefly in the sunlight before disappearing into distance. You think of how life moves, how everything that falls does so only to rise elsewhere unseen, but continued. The old man stands. I must go, he says. There are more reeds to listen to. You want to thank him, but the words feel too small. He seems to sense it. Don't thank me, he says. The silence taught you. I only pointed to it. Then he walks away, his figure fading into the shimmer of grass until he becomes another movement in the wind. You stay seated, holding the flute. The field hums softly. You lift the flute again, but this time you don't play. You simply breathe through it and out, letting the wind pass freely. You realize the instrument no longer needs sound to sing. The act of breathing itself is the song. As the day unfolds, light moves across the field in slow waves. Shadows stretch, then disappear. You lie back, watching clouds drift like vast white sails. The mind, emptied of striving, becomes transparent. Thoughts rise and fall without effort. In their place grows a quiet knowing that everything you've ever sought was never outside this single timeless breath. You close your eyes. Somewhere far away, the bell rings again, the same tone that has followed you through mountains, temples, cities, and dreams. But this time it doesn't call you anywhere. It simply is. The sound expands until even the concept of sound dissolves into pure awareness. When you open your eyes, the sky has shifted to the color of late afternoon. A flock of birds moves overhead, their formation smooth, wordless, inevitable. You raise the flute once more and breathe one long note into the wind, not to summon, not to remember, but to join. The note fades, but you can feel it continuing, carried across the horizon, mingling with the bell, the air, the heartbeat of the earth. You smile, not because you found peace, but because you finally understand it was never missing. And as the sun begins its slow descent, you whisper into the field, "May every silence remember its song." The wind answers, moving through the grass like a long, tender sigh. Dawn arrives without announcement, a quiet light seeping through the fabric of the sky, so soft it feels like forgiveness. The horizon breathes in slow colors, silver, pale gold, a faint blush of rose. The air carries no desire to move quickly. It simply expands, fills, and settles. You awaken not from sleep, but from searching. There is no journey left to make, only the gentle return to what has always been here, the breath. You sit at the edge of the same field from yesterday, the flute resting beside you, its hollow body gleaming faintly with dew. The grass hums with the first murmurs of life insects, stirring birds tracing circles across the sky. A breeze drifts through the open plain, brushing your face with the coolness of somewhere infinite. You close your eyes and listen. Beneath every sound, beneath even silence, there is rhythm, the slow inhaling and exhaling of existence itself. You begin to breathe with it, not as practice, not as ritual, but as recognition. The air enters easily, leaves easily. No need to control. The breath moves on its own, the way the tides move, the way seasons move, the way life moves, inevitable, patient, free. For a moment, memory flickers. You see again the mountain breathing beneath its mist, the river carrying reflections downstream, the temple's bell dissolving into wind, the marketplace of faces, the library of rain, the bridge of invisible birds. They rise like waves from the surface of still water, one after another, each leaving a shimmer of gratitude before returning to calm. Nothing clings. Nothing repeats. You realize none of those places were separate from you. The mountain was your stillness. The river was your letting go. The temple was your breath turning into sound. Every encounter, every lesson was life teaching itself through your eyes. You were never walking through the world. The world was walking through you. You open your eyes. The sun has risen higher now, its light not blinding, but precise, every blade of grass holding a small, trembling universe. The horizon stretches endlessly, but there is no urge to reach it. The need to arrive has dissolved into the joy of presence. A child appears at the far edge of the field, chasing a red ribbon that dances in the wind. You watch as the ribbon escapes his grasp, twists upward, and catches the light. He laughs, the sound ringing pure as a bell, then runs after it again. Something in that laughter, its unguarded music, opens a door inside you. You realize the child isn't a stranger. He is the part of you that never forgot how to belong. You rise and begin walking toward the horizon, not to leave, but to move within the motion that already holds you. Each step feels like breathing through the soles of your feet. The earth gives slightly under your weight, then lifts you again, an invisible dialogue between gravity and grace. When you reach a small hill, you stop and look back. The field stretches wide behind you, shining with quiet simplicity. Everything that was, once the journey, the mountain, the river, the city now feels like a single inhale drawn slowly over many lifetimes, leading only to this exhale now. You sit on the hill, watching the sky unfold. The clouds drift apart, revealing an expanse so vast, it almost erases thought. The wind plays through the reeds, the same rhythm that once filled your flute. You pick it up, raise it to your lips, and let out one last note, long, pure, dissolving. The sound stretches across the plain, blending with the hum of the earth, until you can no longer tell where it ends. You remember what the monk said, "The bell never ends. It only changes form." The flute, too, stops being an instrument. It becomes wind again. And you stop being the one who plays. You become the breath that moves through everything. The world begins to shimmer, not with light, but with transparency. The trees seem lighter, the air almost visible, the ground pulsing gently beneath your hands. You feel your boundaries soften. The you who was once searching, questioning, reaching, slowly dissolves into what is watching. Awareness widens until it can no longer find its edges. The self becomes the sky, endless, clear, untouched. You hear your heartbeat one last time, distinct, steady, then realize it is the same rhythm as the wind in the grass, the same pulse as the ocean beyond the hills. There is no longer you and it. There is only this breathing, ancient, eternal, selfless. The light shifts again. It's not brighter, only more intimate. You can see it move through your hands, through your body, through the world, the same light that shone from the candle, from the lantern, from the reflection in the river. The light that was never outside you. The light that was waiting to be recognized as your own. You whisper not aloud, but inside the stillness, I am the breath that breathes itself. The wind rises slightly, carrying your words outward. They scatter invisible, joining the hum of everything. The sky seems to inhale them, then exhale warmth in return. You close your eyes. The breath deepens once more, and out the oldest prayer, the only one that ever mattered. In that rhythm, thought dissolves entirely. There is no story left to finish, no lesson left to learn, only presence pure and luminous. And in that perfect stillness, you finally understand there was never a journey. There was only awakening happening now and now and now again. The field fades, the sound fades, even the idea of fading fades. Only the breath remains quiet, infinite home.